One point I want to make is that I have been the coroner here for 5 years, and collecting statistics is dependent really on the collector. And part of the problem that we have in the United States, in the state of Illinois, and in our county is really how statistics are collected, typically from death certificates. So if death certificates are not accurate, our statistics are not going to be accurate. We've really made it one of our #1 goals in the coroner's office to be very specific when we list cause of death in addition to manner of death. So cause of death, if everybody dies of polysubstance toxicity, which means combinations of drugs, we are not getting down and drilling down to what drugs people are really dying from. If we're not identifying if they're prescribed drugs or non-prescribed drugs, we are not really going to be able to address the problem in its entirety. So I'm going to hopefully make that pretty clear today. I want to give you just a little overview of what we do in a death investigation. These are the 5 points that we need to know in every death investigation. The who, what, when, where, and how. Who, of course, is very easy. That's identifying the deceased. In a drug overdose case, that's rarely a problem. We're not looking at someone with terrible trauma, burns, injuries, things like that. The what part is one of the main things we're going to focus on. The what is the cause of death. That is the disease or injury that ultimately leads to death. And that's always listed in under the cause of death in the death certificate. Usually there are 3 lines for that. Something due to something due to something. So I always tell kids when I'm out lecturing that when we're looking at something like a heroin overdose, that happens in minutes. If we're looking at something like coronary artery disease, a heart attack, where someone dies of coronary artery disease, they may die of a heart attack in minutes, but that's due to coronary artery disease that takes years to develop. Some people die of a drug overdose over a more prolonged period of time, and they can present different ways, and we'll talk about that. When we're out at a scene, to determine that what is, it's a rather sensitive time. We in the coroner's office are probing people's personal lives. That means we're probing families' personal lives, friends' personal lives. So when we go out to a scene, we typically are notified once first responders and police come to the home and identify that someone is deceased. When we come to the home, we're going to get some information from those first responders, get some basic information from any family or friends that are there. Then we're going to ask the family and friends to step aside. Sometimes the police may take them to the police station if there's a concern. We may ask them to go to the neighbors, maybe sit out in the living room where we then are going to be able to go assess the deceased. When we're at that scene then, we are conducting an investigation alongside the police. So I think of it as 2 lanes on the highway. The police are in one lane, we're in the other lane. We have jurisdiction of the body, which means we control everything around the body of the deceased. The police are not to touch the body without the permission of the coroner. The police conduct the scene investigation. So we're not going to trample on their scene, and they're not going to be moving and touching our body. But as we're doing that, and we're going down those 2 lanes, we will be sharing information. And when we get to the end of that case, we want to be able to arrive, our job, the right cause of death, and then we're going to talk about that manner of death, where we may need to incorporate information that the police collect from the scene. We do collect evidence. I've had this asked many times. Why are you taking my loved one's medications? Their medications. Why do you take them? Well, why do you think we take them? We take them because it gives us information as to what people are prescribed, by what doctor, what diseases they have, and then we reconcile every medication that we collect at a scene, which means we are going to count those pills. We are going to see when that prescription was obtained, and if that person was taking their medications and they were compliant, if they were taking them properly, or if too many of those medications or too many of those pills are gone, that certainly may suggest an overdose. We're going to look at the types of medications that they're on. Today we're going to be focusing on opioids, but we're going to also be focusing on many other drugs that act in a similar fashion, act by a same mechanism of action that may make someone who has an opioid on board, a pain medication on board, that when they're taking medications that also depress respirations or they use alcohol with those medications, that they're more at risk for dying. As the coroner, I am allowed to search everyone's entire medical record. So when we die, there is no HIPAA, there is no Health Protection Act anymore. So that gives me the ability to search people's entire medical file, talk with treating physicians, also to ask a pharmacy to give me the last 12 months of prescriptions written. I typically don't have to do that because I will search the Illinois PMP so that I can have a record of any scheduled medications, any of those medications like opioids, benzodiazepines that people are prescribed. And that is very important because remember, I want to know if ultimately what they die from, they were prescribed or they got it elsewhere. Every agency needs to cooperate when we're conducting a death investigation. So as I said, I'm going to be getting information and conferring with law enforcement, with EMS and fire, and also hospital staff. So what do they know? What information do they obtain? And then also, of course, conferring with the state's attorney when we get to the end of that case. Time of death. Time of death is easy. If someone has recently seen that person and knows that they died. So I just saw them, they went in the bathroom, all of a sudden, oh my God, I heard a thud, I rushed in there, and there they were. Or they said they were just going in to go to the washroom or take a shower, and I wondered why they didn't come out for dinner. I went and found them deceased on the bathroom floor. In contrast to someone who just comes upon someone who's dead, we then determine a post-mortem interval. So we examine the body and look for changes related to the pooling of blood, called the livor mortis, or the stiffening of the body, called rigor mortis. We can also use temperature, but that's a special temperature by taking a temperature in the liver. Obviously looking for signs of decomposition. Gosh, those are some of the saddest cases where no one's checked on that person for such a long time and their body's already decomposing. That presents its own problems when we're doing an investigation because it's harder then to learn good information from an autopsy because the body is liquefying from inside out. Also, when you take toxicology tests, they're much harder to interpret. Where? The scene. Where does this occur? Well, obviously, our main thing is we're looking at that address. We want to know, is that where they live? Is that a certain person's address? And did that person really die here? So is their body position, any fluids around them, their livor and rigor, is that consistent with where they died? And then the last part, the how, the manner of death. Those are the circumstances surrounding the death. If this death is a natural death, an accidental death, if it is a suicidal death, if it's a homicidal death or an undetermined manner of death. When we rule something a homicide, it is not a legally binding verdict. That's up to the state's attorney's office. Also, just to point out, is that we may rule a death an accidental overdose, but in no way does that preclude the state's attorney's office from moving forward with a potential drug-induced homicide charge. And I'm sure our state's attorney, Kenneally, will talk about some of those cases and go over what that means. And lastly, there are some manners of death that are undetermined. After we do every single thing we can possibly do, we still do not know that manner of death. The most common time that this happens is in a drug overdose. And that is because autopsy and toxicology may not give us all the answers. We would have to go back and reevaluate that scene and be able to determine if someone had an overdose in some circumstances that may be accidental versus suicidal, but the toxicology has so many different medications that could cloud someone's mind that we don't know if they intentionally took them or they got so confused taking those meds, they kept taking more and more and then ended up dying. So when we have those undetermined manners, those death certificates may take longer and longer because when we start at a scene investigation, an autopsy, a toxicology special, looking at tissues under the microscope, we need to go back, if we are not sure, and go back to square one and go through all our investigation again and again sometimes before we'll rule on that manner of death. Now, focusing specifically on a suspected overdose. When we go to the scene, we don't say, oh, this is an overdose. That would be wrong. All investigations should be comprehensive. However, a lot of times there may be certain clues there which will make us more suspicious that this represents an overdose. So, of course, we're out on that scene, we're conducting that same scene investigation, and our job will be to determine that cause of death. First, obviously, after our scene is to bring that body back to the coroner's office and conduct an autopsy. Not every 1,650 to 1,700 people who die in McHenry County are going to get an autopsy. That's not necessary. People get an autopsy for several reasons that are specified by the Illinois state statutes. One, any baby 2 or under. Anyone who dies being pursued, apprehended, or incarcerated, and then any death where a homicidal, suspicious death occurs and that we need to evaluate that death and collect evidence. Otherwise, every autopsy is at the judgment of the coroner. That's why there are many variations from county to county who gets an autopsy. The National Academy of Medical Examiners, though, sets standards that should be followed. And one of their standards is that anyone who dies of a suspected drug overdose should have an autopsy. Why is that? Because toxicology takes weeks and weeks to come back. So you can't guess until you have those tests back in several weeks. And if those tests are negative, you have no cause of death. So we always conduct an autopsy to look for natural disease, obviously look for injuries that aren't evident on the outside of the body. So that's our number one tool. Secondly, at autopsy, we collect toxicology. So those are body fluids that we then test for drugs, alcohol, and sometimes other poisons or chemicals. We try to collect a lot of different types of specimens because depending on the specimen, it tells us if something was in someone's system recently, so if they have an acute use of it and a more immediate use, if they've used something over days, or if they've potentially used something over weeks to months. So we'll typically collect blood, immediate use of those medications, drugs, alcohol, urine, days, and then we can take bile, weeks, hair, nails, months and months. And then we don't take hair and nails in everybody, but that's certain specific deaths. And then when we do that toxicology on those different body fluids, we're going to identify the drug. So we're going to say this drug is present, and every drug that's present will actually be measured. It'll be quantified. And it's those drugs in those quantities that help tell us if those levels of drugs are therapeutic, which means those are the levels you'd expect if someone is using their medication properly. If it's toxic, if it will make you sick, but individually you won't die from that level, or if that level is lethal. There are those cases, though, that I pointed out earlier, that when multiple classes of drugs are used and those levels are toxic, in combination they can be lethal. And those are those polysubstance toxicity deaths. And I'm going to keep harping on those as we go along. And then, of course, as I told you, I'm going to be identifying if medications are prescribed or not prescribed. We'll be sharing that information with law enforcement, as will they be sharing information. Because one thing that I ask at every scene is if drugs are found at a scene, powdery substances, baggies, paraphernalia are found, that material gets tested. Because that helps us direct first our initial panel of testing that we'll order, and then if we need to order additional testing. So that is, though, currently a little bit of a limiting factor, because with the number of overdose deaths that are occurring in our state, the Illinois State Police Toxicology Lab is backed up easily 6 months now. So our families are sometimes having to wait 6 months to get a final cause of death. So I think I've tried to urge some of our legislators that Illinois State Police needs more money. There are a few police jurisdictions that actually send the drugs to a private lab and they absorb that cost themselves. And then the other thing too is getting out in a forum like this, educating the public as to what we have going on here in McHenry County and what we can do about it. So I'm kind of the downer talk. These people are going to kind of give you the upside today of what good things are happening in McHenry County related to drug overdose. So when we're out in that scene, what kind of history might we obtain? Well, of course, we might get that someone has a past history of drug use or drug abuse, or that they have a chronic pain problem. They see a pain doctor. We know they're prescribed these medications. We know sometimes they get mixed up taking these medications. And we'll be asking them, well, what have you noticed lately? I've noticed that my son or daughter is more withdrawn. I noticed, she's wearing long sleeve shirts. She's not doing her school activities anymore. She's not hanging with people that I want her to hang with. So we'll be having to probe into a lot of things. And I am amazed at the resiliency of our families who, once they understand why we're asking all these things, they want to know just as badly as we do. And sometimes you just have to take a step back and say, we'll come back to that, and we'll ask you about that. But we're asking because we want to try to get to the heart of the problem. And this individual died, but maybe we'll be able to try to understand what is the flow of drugs? What's the trend in this high school? What's happening with these prescribers that maybe we could try to get a handle on and not keep adding more people to the list of drug overdose? The other thing too is, what kind of symptoms did they have when they were last seen? Well, they looked really confused. They looked like their pupils in their eyes were really tiny. We noticed that they just seemed really slow. Or they were laying on the couch. This is a real common one. They're laying on the couch and they're snoring. Well, do they usually snore? Not like this. Snoring is always a bad sign. Snoring means respiratory depression. Means something knocks out your drive to breathe. Your depth of respiration is less. The tissues become looser, and you're not getting oxygen. So whenever we hear that, we go, oh, that's bad. That's bad. And then, of course, too, are there drugs at the scene? We talked about that. We want to take control of those. If they're prescriptions, if they're illicits, then the police will take control of those. The other thing we want to know, too, is how was the deceased found? Because part of that respiratory depression and that depression to the body is that their consciousness is decreased. So what can happen is, as they're like in that groggy state, Sometimes they can burp up and they'll aspirate, where food then will go down into their lungs. And we'll see that if we see like a little bit of dark fluid on their face and that their face is in a pillow, or we can see because they were had such a low level of consciousness from using drugs that they'll be laying on a pillow and their neck will be kinked, or they'll lay over. I had a person who was actually laying over a couch and their neck was pushing on the couch. You and I, if we're of full consciousness and we're laying there and our oxygen level started to decrease and our carbon dioxide level went up, what would we do? We'd go, we'd wake ourselves up and move. But when your level of consciousness is low, you don't move. And we call that positional asphyxia. So people can actually develop positional asphyxia from intoxicating drugs or alcohol. These are some of the things that we might see out on a scene. This is the classic foam cone. That's the little white foam that's coming out of the mouth. That's related to the fact that we're not deep breathing as much. Fluid builds up in the lungs. People have ever heard the term pulmonary edema. People mostly associate it with older people when their heart is failing and fluid backs up in their lungs. Well, this is what can happen in any age person who is under the influence of opioids, and they build up to that toxic level. Needle marks. So we may or may not see needle marks. Sometimes they hide them between the toes in a tattoo. When needle marks are at their worst, you can see little abscesses under the skin. So skin popping and abscess formation. Obviously, this is what heroin or any injectable type paraphernalia would look like when we're at the scene. We've actually had people, and people can die this quickly, that they can inject themselves with heroin, fall over, and still have the needle in their arm. That is how toxic heroin is, fentanyl is, fentanyl analogs are. And I tell the kids when I'm out there, I said, there is no, this is one of the main myths, there is no way that you can use heroin or fentanyl that is safe. So that is a total myth. Oh, I'll smoke it. Oh, I will snort it. It doesn't matter. You can die any way you take it. Here is this is the pill scene. This sad case is a lady who was at the Crystal Lake Motel, mid-60s. She is prescribed all these medications. We collect all those pill bottles, every loose pill, put them back together, and this poor lady was one of those undetermined manners of death. Now, what kind of findings might we have in an autopsy? Well, guess what? We might have no findings, but we've ruled out natural disease then. And in young people, it's common that we'll have no findings or very subtle findings that are nonspecific but may support a drug overdose once we see toxicology. So, of course, we talked about the needle marks. The next are heavy congested lungs. And again, why does that happen? It's pulmonary edema. We might see swelling of the brain. So we might see the brain look like this. The gyri here shouldn't be all flattened and puffy. There should be more room between here. So why do people get swelling of the brain? Because their oxygen levels go down. So their brain actually starts to swell in response to loss of oxygen. This would be more common in someone who died over a prolonged period of time, not so much in someone with an acute overdose. This represents that pulmonary congestion. The lungs should look pink and aerated like this. When they get all heavy, they're not aerating, and that's what congests people's lungs. When we do an autopsy, every organ that gets taken out is weighed. So people with really congested lungs, their lungs can weigh double. So they can weigh like 8,000-9,000 grams, where normally they would be 400, 500 grams. And then this is, like you can see, there is no air pocket there. This is the lung up close. This is someone who has very dense pneumonia. So say someone is using drugs, they aspirate, all the stomach contents go up and then down into the trachea, down into the lungs. Those lungs get very heavy. They're not going to exchange air. They're not going to oxygenate. They're not going to send oxygen through your body. And then what's going to happen? Your lungs fill up with fluid, your brain swells, and then you may end up dying of either pneumonia, an infection and pneumonia, or you may die of what's called anoxic brain injury, where your brain swells so much that you end up where you will never come to, and then you're declared brain dead. You know what's really, I think, sometimes lost in the realm of thinking about people who use drugs is what are the other secondary factors that can happen? Well, one is hepatitis C. So if we look at the picture, see if I can do that, look at this picture, that's a good old normal liver. On scale with this, that's a liver that has cirrhosis. You can see it's all shriveled and it's all nodular. So hepatitis C, second most common cause of liver cirrhosis. Number one is what? Alcohol, right? So you can see what will happen over time. Secondly, what else is going to happen when we do IV drugs? HIV. So the risk of HIV/AIDS keeps going up. And then long-term sequelae, long-term effects when people are using injectables is that obviously bacteria is going to get into their bloodstream. This is what one of our heart valves looks like. These are the little porti tendini that hold the valve in place. These are all called vegetations. These are all growths on the valve, and those are growths of infection that come. Somebody with a valve like this is going to go into heart failure, and they will only live if they get a valve replacement. This actually comes from a case of a guy who had endocarditis. You typically get treated with a minimum of 6 weeks of IV antibiotic. And if it's this bad, you'll end up with a valve replacement. This poor man went and started back doing drugs again, got endocarditis back again, and they could not replace the valve. Toxicology testing. So I gave you a little idea of what we do by taking those different types of fluids. Well, we take a bunch of different types of fluids, and guess what? There are a bunch of types of panels that we can run. So think of it when we go to the doctor, and maybe we're going to get a blood count, maybe we're going to get an electrolyte panel, maybe we're going to get something to look at our liver or kidneys. Well, in toxicology testing, we're going to direct that testing to the panel as to what history that person has. So what's the history of drugs that they've used? What medications are they prescribed? And then we throw the net out wide. So we can start with something about 300 different drugs and alcohol. It then expands to at least 500 to 600 different drugs, alcohol, and other chemicals. And then we have different panels that we add on. Say we're concerned that some young person has little packets with a little smiley face on, synthetic cannabinoids. So we're going to have a synthetic cannabinoid panel. We might end up where we're worried that they have one of these new synthetic opioids. We're then going to be getting a psychoactive panel. So we may have to add panels along the way. And again, each of those take time to run. We make sure we have as much blood as we can so that we can run everything that we need. Each panel costs money. And each panel then will help us get to the end result of that cause of death. And then I talked about making sure that if we have scene material, what was at the scene? So if we're at the scene, say, all right, they're sending that out to ISP. In 6 to 8 weeks, though, I know that A&M had heroin and fentanyl, but there was a gray powder at that scene. Am I going to say, well, they died of heroin and fentanyl? I could, but if I've got material at the scene, I want that tested, because there are people who have combinations of heroin, fentanyl, and may have these other compounds present, and that if we don't know that they're there, we're not going to understand what drugs are in our community. So I'm extra aggressive in trying to look at every case to make sure that we can identify everything there. And we're lucky because we've got some excellent certified labs that run these tests. And that's one thing I want to point out, that the toxicology labs are certified forensic labs. This isn't going to Syntag or dropping our blood off there and hey, Dr. Majewski, why don't you know what the cause of death is in a week? Why? Because these labs are certified. They need to reproduce these results with 2 different scientific methods to make them valid, so that way we know they're accurate and they'll stand up in court. Here is an example of a toxicology panel. Remember that lady in the Crystal Lake Motel I told you about? You saw all those pills? Well, guess what? She was prescribed butyl, which is like a phenobarbital. It's a sleep medicine. She was prescribed Xanax, alprazolam. These are elevated levels, but she was decomposed. So these are also tissue levels. So these are elevated, but I can't tell the same as someone with a blood level. Because, when I go to get my blood drawn, I'm not saying I would go ahead and take a piece of liver and see how my drug level of my blood pressure medicine is. So it's much harder to interpret. But she also has morphine, codeine, hydrocodone, and if I showed you the second page, she has tramadol, she's got, I think it was Benadryl, so she's got many different medications. All of these are respiratory depressants. So, she also had a lot of pills left at the scene. If someone were going to overdose, are they going to overdose on a lot of pills or one single pill? We don't know. So that's where we have to go back and dig through that person's history and search. We searched her past life in Florida over the past 10 years. Everybody who knew her around this area. But even after that, interviewed every doctor who was treating her. She was a retired nurse. So, do we know that she did this intentionally in the end? No, we never did know. Here is classic heroin. If we see 6-monoacetylmorphine, which metabolizes to morphine, codeine is a contaminant, that is heroin. Rarely do you have heroin in the blood because it metabolizes in 2 to 3 minutes. It's gone out of the blood. So we're looking to identify that 6-man. If in the blood we can only identify morphine, but we find that 6-man in the urine, it means that they live longer. So they lived hours rather than minutes. If they have a lot of 6-man in the urine, they're a regular user, right? Because urine, days of use. This person also uses Valium. This person also uses marijuana. So that panel tells us a lot. They also use alcohol. So this would be someone who died of a heroin overdose with concomitant use of Valium and alcohol as co-respiratory depressants. So let's get down to some definitions before I'm going to give you all sorts of charts, and then you're going to go, oh my gosh, these are busy, but we'll get to those. So let's just talk, since we're talking opioids. 10 minutes? Good. All right, opioids, any substance that acts on the opioid receptors in the brain to produce a morphine-like effect. So a pain-relieving effect. So anything that will relieve pain, things to treat moderate to severe pain. That's the category. It's now called opioids, not opiates. We break down opioids into 3 basic classes. We've got the opiates, which are naturally occurring opioids. Morphine, codeine, heroin. The semi-synthetics, probably the ones that a lot of people are familiar with because your doctor prescribes them when you break your ankle or you just had surgery. So those are things that are modified, opiates that are modified in the lab to produce pills like hydrocodone, Vicodin or Norco, the trade names, hydromorphone, Dilaudid, given IV or IM in the hospital, rarely orally but can be, oxycodone, Percocet or Oxycontin. And we have to remember too that when people use these drugs, there is typically Tylenol with them. So people who end up abusing opioids that have Tylenol in them also are at risk for liver damage when they get excessive amounts of acetaminophen in their blood. Now, we've got some real terrible new dangers, and these are the synthetic opioids. This is where fentanyl, and we used to only hear about fentanyl when you'd be in the recovery room and you were in just terrible pain, and the anesthesiologist would come in and give you some fentanyl. It's very short acting, 10 to 15 minutes, it'll knock that pain right down. It's not meant for long-term pain relief unless it's given in a patch form. So who gets patches? Typically people with cancer. So they're gonna be given a patch. That patch lasts several days, and that patch comes in different strengths and then is removed and replaced. Unfortunately, as physicians have they've been striving to keep pain down, called the 6 vital sign. Let's make sure people aren't in pain. That's when they started giving fentanyl patches to people with chronic pain. I have seen people in their 30s and 40s being prescribed fentanyl patches. That is that's recipe for disaster. With the new CDC prescribing recommendations for physicians, I hope we're going to see that be less and less. We also then have that fentanyl, which when it's chemically modified, turns into all these other types of fentanyl. We also have a drug called U47700. It came to market with Upjohn, but they realized it was so potent, they never actually, after all their testing, brought it to the market. But guess who brought it to the market? All those chemists and all those people in Southeast Asia that knew that way they could bring that drug forward and cause a problem. Death. And then we've got these different W compounds and some other newer isolates. You got to understand that these drugs are much more potent than heroin. We look at heroin 2 to 4 times stronger than morphine. U47700, 7 to 8 times. Fentanyl, 100 times. Carfentanil, that's that elephant tranquilizer, 10,000 times stronger than morphine.
Oh my God.
These drugs can come in a counterfeit form. So if you look at that, you think, oh, well, that looks like Vicodin. Well, guess what? That looks like oxycodone, but both of those had U47700 added to them and were sold on the black market. How about our statistics and trends? I'm going to touch on a little national, then a little bit Illinois, and then really McHenry County. So just I want you to get the trend here. This is U.S. drug deaths, all drug deaths, going from 1999 to 2016. So about 65,000 a year. These are the different breakdowns. So you can see, here's heroin, synthetic opioids, other than methadone, so just ignore that. So the synthetics. Here are prescribed medications, cocaine, methamphetamine, methadone. So what is rising the most? Fentanyl and analogs. Heroin, you can see how it's still rising, but actually not at the same, and not as a great rate. Prescription, still rising, but at least it's flattening out a little bit. Cocaine, I think it's dependent on the economy. Meth, always around, but a low level, especially here. Methadone, used for treatment. And hopefully we're going to see more methadone and Suboxone, but we're going to have to caution what that may do. This is all overdose deaths across the country, and mostly I want you to see males always outpace females. Same thing with opioids. Again, on the rise, males outpacing females. Prescription opioid pain relief, you can see that's leveling out. In Illinois, it's really leveling out. That's because we've got a very aggressive PMP system, and doctors are hawked to use it. And that's going to be part of our license renewal in the coming 3 years. Heroin deaths continue to rise. And then deaths from heroin and fentanyl. And if we looked at that, it's rising at a higher level. Now, Illinois, it's going to mirror the same. You can see heroin deaths going up. You can see that any of the prescriptions also going up. And then they break these down a bit. I just want to kind of give you the overall trend. I want you to look here. Heroin, the total is going up, but heroin alone actually is going down. It's typically, we're not seeing just heroin. We're seeing heroin and fentanyl, heroin and benzodiazepines. Those are like Xanax, Valium. Again, remember, the concomitant use of something that also depresses respirations. We may see heroin combined with the medication that's supposed to help prevent people relapsing to heroin. And then again, people with those synthetics, rising the greatest amount. That's too busy. Here's our stats. Mainly I want you to see that our number of coroner's cases is just sky high. All of last year, 278, we're already up at 305, and that's drug overdoses. Our number of autopsies, way up. We still have 2 months to go, and these statistics are sad. So look at our drug overdose stats. Already 68 for 10 months. We only had 56 last year. And I'm going to tell you today, I just had several more toxins that came in. I'm at 70, and there's only one that's questionable. Motor vehicle deaths. Look at that. Contrast that to motor vehicle deaths. 2+ times more overdose deaths than motor vehicle deaths. Remember how it used to be, oh, the teens died of prom, they call me to do prom reenactment, people are dying of motor vehicle accidents. They're clearly outpaced by drug overdoses today. Just looking at their general schematic here in McHenry County, we mirror everything that our nation and Illinois does. This is our total opioid deaths. This is our heroin deaths. We're leveling out a bit. This is our benzos. This is really not accurate. The number of people who have, that's pure benzodiazepine use. You can see it's going up, but if I said who will use benzos with either an opioid or fentanyl or heroin, 25 out of the 68. The use of anxiety medicines is off the charts. And then cocaine is going up. This is even a better breakdown. So you can see that general trend again for opioids. You can see that for heroin in the silver, and these are fentanyl in the gold bars. And just to add the concern of our analogs. So right here, we've had 4 analogs in 16, 3 so far. In 2016, 2 of those analogs were U47700. There were only 8 identified U47700s in the state of Illinois. We had 2. As I say, I'm aggressive in looking for it, and if someone's toxicology doesn't fit the picture, we're going to keep looking until we find that cause of death. Busy slide, but I like this breakdown because, again, what does it show? Over a 2-to-1 male to female preponderance of overdose deaths. Our age breakdown. This is sad too. What's the trend? Younger and younger. What's our biggest group? 20 to 40. If you counted back here, it really used to be 40 to 60. Look at this. We have older people dying too. Believe it or not, some of those people live this long and they're heroin users. Some are fentanyl and then some are prescription. And if you look at our drugs, again, heroin going up, fentanyl way up. Our prescribed opioid overdoses, as I say, thankfully, we're leveling out. We're actually decreasing. The use of alcohol, that's not pure alcohol like people dying of just alcohol. 3 of those were just straight alcohol. Blood alcohols of 0.5, 0.6, I've never seen such a thing. But the rest of those are people who use these other drugs and drink with them. And then cocaine is going up. Better stock market, I think. Just 1 or 2 more slides. So just, again, look at that. That comparison of people who die from drug overdose over double from a motor vehicle accident. The number of overdose deaths due to opioids rising, heroin rising, fentanyl rising, synthetics, and then our cocaine and alcohol. I think that is it. That is our morgue, and we should be proud of it. We take good care of it. We use our money wisely in the coroner's office. We have a budget a little over $500,000, and I'm going to be needing a lot more money this year with our number of drug overdose deaths and sadly too, our number of suicides. Now just one last thing. If we look at our number of people who die of drug overdose, 95% of those people die of the manner of death being accident. There are a few people in our county who actually have suicide by drug overdose. What's interesting, I'll go to a conference in Upper New York. What's the main way that people commit suicide? Drug overdose. Here, it's gunshot and then hanging. So there's some variation there, but that's a talk for another day, and Rachel's gonna give me the light, so I have to stop. So, thank you very much.
In the interest of time, we're going to move along to our next speaker, McHenry County State's Attorney, Mr. Patrick Kenneally, who is going to present to us the legal aspect, the legal view perspective on the crisis in Baker County and the different programs maybe that are coming along. And with that, I'll hand it over to the State's Attorney, Mr. Kenneally.
Okay. Thank you very much. I see a lot of faces that I've seen before, so that's wonderful, but I'm also seeing a lot of new faces, and I think that that's critical in order to get the conversation regarding opioids to where it needs to be, especially due to the fact that it's taking so many especially due to the fact that it's taking the lives of so many people in this community. It's having tragic and cascading consequences all across the country. All right. I think the great irony of morphine is that it was developed in order to treat pain. Right? The irony is that it just causes so much pain. And the idea is that we as a society need to start thinking about how much pain are we willing to, how much of the pain, physical pain that we're suffering, are we willing to trade for all the pain that these kinds of things cause? And I think that's something that we're sort of grappling with across the entire country, both in terms of what's going on in DC, but also questions that people are asking themselves in hospital systems and other ways. So Dr. Majewski did a extraordinary job of laying out, I think, what the problem is. And so I'm going to try to fill in, why are we having this problem, and also what are we doing about it, what more needs to be done about it, in order to really get this thing under control and start seeing some of the numbers, some of these horrific numbers. I mean, there's I think 68 overdose deaths total. In terms of the opioids, they make up the vast majority of those deaths, and these are people's children. I mean, there's women here tonight. If anybody wants to have a better sense of the consequences of what it's like to have a family member addicted to opioids, I would have no doubt that they'd be willing to share their story afterwards. So that's my little spiel. So first and foremost, all right, opioid charges in the county, all right, they're up about 300% from 2005. Now, that doesn't mean that drug charges are up in the county. In fact, crime for the most part started going down in the 90s, leveled off in the 2000s, and with various little blips have remained relatively constant. What it means is that people's drug of choice has changed. It's gone from things like cocaine and alcohol and methamphetamine primarily to opioids. The problem with opioids is that, there's a lot of problems. First is that it's very addictive. Okay? Back in the 1950s and back in the 1960s, nobody was being prescribed morphine. The reason not many people, except for those suffering from severe pain, end-of-life issues, were not being prescribed morphine is because everybody knew it was incredibly addictive. Right? And that if you are being prescribed morphine, you have bigger problems. In other words, you're dying or you're suffering from such severe pain that you're unable to go about a daily life than addictions that they were willing to risk that. 80s, 90s, through sort of a perfect storm of circumstances. You have drug companies who are trying to make money, aligning themselves with hospitals, aligning themselves with a society that is growing increasingly averse to physical pain. You have the development of these charts where it's like, what's your pain level? 1 is happy face, 10 is unhappy face, and what do most people say? You know, when you're feeling any kind of pain, generally people have a tendency to overestimate it. They want their pain to stop immediately. And so the idea is, well, we're going to go with the sad face. And so the amount of opioids that were prescribed in the 90s increased enormously. So what percentage of the world's population do you guys think the United States consumes in terms of this? You have 5% of the population. What percent of the opioids do you think the United States consumes? 80 to 90%. That's exactly right. Okay? So in the 90s, we as a society developed a very real and strong taste, we created an appetite, all right, for all of us, for opioids, all right? And the chance, if you're on opioids, I think for more than 5 days, your chances of actually getting addicted to an opioid go up about 50%. That's incredible, right? So this is why, so opioids, heroin are vile, all right? When we look at kids 18, 19 years old, their life is going like this, you know, they're in high school, they're doing real well, they're about to graduate, and all of a sudden they start opioids and their life sort of right off a cliff. And literally right off a cliff. And this is why, okay? Not only are they very addictive, people who use opioids, your tolerance increases exponentially from when you started. Okay, so let's say that, this is the example that I like to use. Let's say that you want to say that I'm an alcoholic. So at the time when I just started really having problems in my life, I'm showing up late to work, and I'm having marital problems, I'm not going to my kids' soccer games, I'm drinking about 10 beers every single week, okay? Now, 3 years down the road, I'm a washed out alcoholic. I'm living in a motel, my wife's divorced me, my kids won't talk to me. How many beers am I drinking a night? 20? All right, so I've gone up by a factor of 2. With heroin, all right, and with opioids, what you can get your initial sort of hit of opioids for about $10. Your first hit is about 10 milligrams for about $10, all right? And what starts as 10 milligrams goes up to 2,000 milligrams, all right, over the course of a year. So what starts as sort of a $10 a day habit is now hundreds and hundreds of dollars a day just to maintain that habit. So what do you think? So somebody who's addicted to opioids, how well do you think they're doing with their school? How well do you think that they're doing with their job, right? How well, I mean, do you think that they're making a lot of money? The answer is, of course not. They're having a horrific time with their lives. And so what do they have to do in order to get money? Steal. They gotta rob, they gotta steal. If you're women, over 70% of them are prostituting themselves in order to get money. So that's not good. In fact, that is pretty scary stuff. And what that means is that this has now consequences for a community, right? So it has consequences for me, it has consequences for you. Maybe your car is getting robbed, right? Maybe your house is getting robbed. Maybe your son or daughter has been victimized in some way by somebody who's looking for money. This is how opioids affects every single one of us, and why the only real solution, what we all need to do, is to be part of this solution. Okay? So here's what we're doing about it in McHenry County. I'm sorry, I'm just getting over a cold, so I'm damn and you can tell I'm very sick. So anyway, long and short. Yeah. So what are we doing in McHenry County in order to address all this? Yes, thank you. Part of it. I'm sorry. Well, the first thing that we're doing is we started the Narcan program. Okay, and what the Narcan program does is that it has put Narcan in the hands of every single police officer in McHenry County. All right. Narcan is the anti-overdose drug. All right. And what Narcan does is it causes an immediate reversal of the effects of opioids. So if somebody's having an overdose event, police are now armed with this stuff and they save lives. All right. One of the lives that the police saved was the life of a pregnant woman. Okay. So she was 6 months pregnant. Okay. And the police saved her lives. And the police saved her life, and she thereafter went into another one of our programs, which was called the Way Out program. All right. So anyway, I think it's important to recognize Centegra as part of that. So we, the McHenry County Substance Abuse Coalition, as well as Centegra, as well as McHenry County
Mental Health.
As well as the McHenry County Mental Health Board, they started this program. And we got it in the hands of every single police department. Prior to that, there were a number of police departments that did not have Narcan. So what that means is that there were a lot of police officers that would show up on scene and just simply didn't have the ability to save people's lives. So how many lives have we saved so far?
I think the last number was 29, 30 if you count the baby.
30 if you count them.
Nice.
So the second thing that we did was the Way Out program. Has anybody heard of the Way Out program? All right, so the Way Out program is just a wonderful program. It allows anybody who's suffering from any type of addiction to go into any police department and be fast-tracked for inpatient services. Generally what happens is they're taken to the Centennial Hospital where they're evaluated, and thereafter they are fast-tracked for inpatient treatment. Now, how many beds do you think are available in McHenry County for rehab? Like how many inpatient beds? 0. How many detox beds do you think there are? 0. That's exactly right. So, that's one of the challenges that we're going to face going forward, and we're working with the McHenry County Substance Abuse Coalition as well as New Directions, and the idea is that we're going to need to get a long-term solution in this county where people can go, whether they have insurance, whether they're underinsured, or otherwise, so that they can get the treatment that they need. Because heroin is not something that you can just get off of, all right? So when you have a heroin addiction, if you want to get off of it, you go into what's called withdrawal, all right? And imagine, the best way to describe this is imagine the worst flu that you've ever had, all right? Now multiply it by 10, okay? And that's what it's like. So it's existential and physical torture for a period of approximately 2 weeks. Right? And so many people who are using heroin, generally they don't want to be using heroin. Right? Many of them continue to use heroin because they want to avoid the consequences of withdrawal, because they're too scared to face it. And so if you want people to get off of heroin, the first step is not, hey, go to an NA. Right? The first step is you're going to need medical attention for a period of 3 to 5 to 14 days, okay, before you're mentally, physically ready to begin the process of recovery. Mostly through a 12-step program. Right? So that's another one. That's another reason why heroin is just such. And the only word I can say is denial. I mean, seriously. That's the only appropriate word that I can use to describe the consequences of heroin. So, heroin, opioids, morphine, they're all used to treat pain, okay? And the cartels saw this coming probably well before a lot of people did. There were a number of people at the McHenry County Substance Abuse Coalition that sort of knew that, hey, look, we're going to have an opioid problem. It's 10 years out, and nobody's doing anything about it, and nobody sees it. Well, there was one organization that saw it, and that was the cartels. All right? What they did was they flooded the market with heroin because they knew that a population that had become accustomed to using opioid-based pain medication was eventually going to be cut off. And what happens after you're cut off is if you're addicted to it, you go looking for other avenues. And if the supply is there and it's cheap and you can get addicted, the cartels knew that this was the type of substance that you were going to continue to use for a long time. These were good customers. Okay? So that's one of the reasons why I think we're facing the epidemic that we're looking at right now. Another reason is that, look, morphine, heroin, these types of substances are used to treat pain. And they treat physical pain, but they also treat existential pain. All right? So in 2008, you have essentially an entire generation, all right, that was either underemployed, and they're 20-something, underemployed, living with their parents, or relegated to the service, or relegated to the service economy. Right? Many of these people were suffering from just general angst when it comes to, I have no job, I'm living with my parents. It was my dream just to sort of get out of this neighborhood when I was a kid. And now they feel stuck. Now they don't have opportunities. And these are the kinds of situations where heroin becomes a viable option. I think all of us know that the society that we live in today, every one of us can sort of feel it. There's a sense of dislocation. There's not the same sense of community that many of us remember that was part of our childhoods, that was part of our early adulthood. And by virtue of that, a lot of people feeling alone. And again, these types of substances are used to treat pain. All right? So let me see if I missed anything else that I wanted to talk about. Drug court. Okay, has anybody heard of drug court? Yeah. Okay. Drug court is probably one of my favorite programs that is working today to not just rehabilitate people, but to restore people, body and soul. Okay? What drug court does is that people who are charged with criminal offenses, and that's one of the main points of intervention. So one of the main points of intervention is when you get arrested, because you will eventually get arrested. Addiction ends in one of three ways, as we often say. Either recovery, incarceration for an extended period of time, or death. All right? One of the main intervention points is jail. So this is a wonderful opportunity to take people and to help them. If you ever become addicted to opioids or heroin, this is a struggle that you're going to have to face now for the rest of your life. All right? So we need to provide you with the means in order to do that, because what that does is that reduces recidivism. And not just reduces the recidivism of using drugs it also reduces the recidivism of the crimes that you would otherwise be committing in order to get the drugs that you need. So what drug court does is it's an intensive probationary period. It takes somebody who's suffering from addiction and it puts them in a group, and there's an entire team that's thinking about them, all right? Working on them. There's a social worker, there's a nurse, there's rehabilitation specialists, there's people that are going to help you get a job, and they're testing you approximately 3 times a week. Now, in the normal criminal justice system, if you test positive for any type of drug or substance, there's not an immediate consequence, okay? You'll test positive, and then we have to notify your lawyer, and then your lawyer comes in and thinks about all the different ways as to why you didn't really test positive, even though it says right there that you're positive. You want to talk about all the different ways that the evidence, that you can't get your evidence in before the judge, all the ways it was tampered with and all the rest of it. So by the time you're actually facing a consequence for testing positive, it may be weeks, if not months down the road. And as anybody who has kids knows, that's really no way to punish somebody in order for it to be effective. Rather, you need to punish somebody in a timely way in order for the message finally to get across. So what drug court does is it says, no, when you're in drug court, okay, if a test comes back positive, that's it, all right? And maybe you'll spend a night in jail. Okay, maybe you're required to do more community service. But what drug court understands is that instead of just kicking these people out of drug court, is that relapse is a part of recovery. All right? So generally speaking, when this process plays itself out over about a 24-month period, you have people who have now been restored to their former selves. All right? And at the drug court graduation, if anybody has not been to that, I encourage all of you to go to that. They put the picture of they put the mugshot of the person up, all right, before they give the drug court participant the opportunity to give a speech. And when you just sort of juxtapose the comparison there, because a lot of times you have somebody who's pale, scabs on their face, teeth missing, overly skinny. They look like a junkie, and then you have this person who's now before you. That could be somebody that you would entrust with your children or with your finances, or otherwise, who has a plan, who has a career, whose family is back there glowing about their wonderful accomplishment. I think that as a agency and as somebody who works in coordination with many people in the government system to try to help people, this is a real success. And it's a success because while well over 60% of the people who are arrested and sent to prison get out of prison and commit another crime, that figure is less than 13% for those people who have gone through drug court. And I think that's a wonderful success. So we've expanded that program as well. So the primary challenge I think that we face right now is ensuring that we have inpatient treatment or long-term housing, long-term recovery housing for those who are struggling with addiction. And that, I think, is really going to be what our next step is. So with that, thank you for allowing me to stand up here and sweat. I'll be on panel, so if anybody has any questions that they'd like to direct to me, I'd be more than happy to answer. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. to really innovate the way that you're treating and approaching this crisis in our communities and our county. So thank you again. Last up, or last but not least, final presenter of the evening, to bring us his personal experience of tragedy, struggle, joy, hope, and I imagine a lot more that he's going to share with us tonight. Crystal Lake native, a founder of Abandoned Recovery Foundation, author. You may recognize him from A&E's The Dope Man documentary. You might recognize him because he might have saved your life or the life of someone that you know. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce Mr. Tim Ryan.
Thought you were dope, Zach. There you get me all nervous. I'm putting your ass in treatment so quick. I'm Tim Ryan. I'm a great recovering alcoholic and drug addict. Well, a lot of stuff. I'm going to throw a lot of information at you real quick. I grew up in Crystal Lake here. My grandfather built the first house on the lake. He used to give away to his friends. And he lost them after the Depression, and my dad bought it back from the Hammond family in 1969, so maybe 70, but that's where I grew up. I've learned a lot over the past 4 years since I walked out of prison. When I first got out of prison, man, I was AA 12-step to the core abstinence base. You better do it my way, treatment or die. And I've had to change my thinking because I'm sick and tired of burying people. I've attended 117 funerals in the past 3.5 years, the first being my 20-year-old son. There's a gentleman I saw speak in Chicago last year by the name of Dr. Gabor Mate. And if you have not seen his videos, I highly recommend go to YouTube and watch him. This man rocked my world. There were 300 clinicians, and I was one of 2 people there that was not a clinician. My clinical degree is 30 years of street credit as an alcoholic and drug addict. School of Hard Knocks. He asked a question. He said, how many people here are adopted? I put my hand up. There's about 30 of us. And he said, do you realize that people that are adopted are 48,000 times more susceptible to being alcoholic or drug addict due to abandonment issues? And he said when he meets, he's been working with addicts for 40 years. And when he meets with someone struggling with addiction, he doesn't say why the addiction, he says why the pain. Everyone that deals with substance abuse has underlying trauma. He said throw this choices and disease stuff out the window. It's all pain. Whether it's emotional, physical, mental, spiritual, sexual, whatever. So I looked at my life and I said, what trauma do I have? I had a great family. You know, my dad worked at the Board of Trade 26 years, never missed a day of work. My mom co-founded Market Day, had dinner every night at 6:30. You know, a great family life. But then I was a kid that struggled with learning disabilities, ADD, dyslexia. I was a stupid kid. I was beat up every day for 10 years straight by my older brother. He was a narcissist. I was molested by my babysitter at 12 years old. There was all my trauma. And at 14 years old, going up to Lake Geneva, alcohol was the solution. And then at 15, it was cocaine. And that's, I worked at Pine More. Hell, I've been humping up here at Pine More Pizza, the old Pine More, since I was 9 years old. I can remember sitting in the cooler at 10, cracking a beer. My foul mouth came from Dickie Tronzel, you can blame him on that. And I started, when the old Pine More broke down, I started working at Pine More the next day it opened, and I got on the work program in high school, because school wasn't my forte, and I flipped pizzas and worked my butt off, but it gave me the opportunity to drink and do a lot of drugs. The only thing I cared about was water. That's the only thing I was good at. But I found myself with myself, by myself, crying myself a lot. A very lonely individual. But I was a guy that could never put out my hand and ask for help. How you doing? I'm great. Everything was always great in Tim Ryan's world. Things are much different now. There's a lot more resources. I just spoken to the Wheaton High Schools today, and I was absolutely blown away by the social workers, the counselors, the school resource officers. Overwhelming. You went down to the dean's office at Chris Lake Central between 82 and 86, your ass was in trouble. It's as simple as that. You were in trouble. Don't blame the disease of addiction on anyone. People make a bad choice. That's all there is to it. These kids today smoking this weed that's 80, 90%, 70% THC. The weed we grew up smoking was 10% THC. So these kids are smoking this killer weed, their inhibitions are dropped, and I come up and say, try this pill, snort this line, Pandora's box. As Pat was talking about, I'm ADD, so I jump all over the place. As Pat was talking about opiates, some people really don't understand how powerful opiates are. If I lock the doors here and for a week straight, we all smoke weed and drink alcohol. At the end of the week, maybe 6, 7 of them might have a substance abuse issue. But if I lock the door and we all do opiates, and as the coroner said, Vicodin, Percocet, Percodan, Demerol, Dilaudid, Oxycontin, oxymorphine, Loratab, Suboxone, methadone, fentanyl, heroin, those are all opiates. We all do opiates for a week. Every person in this room will be a full-blown opiate addict. No questions asked. 95% of people that do opiates will never get clean sober. The problem today is it's not heroin. It's fentanyl. It's other analogs. It's carfentanil. And unfortunately, the people that relapse are usually young. You don't have a chance to have a relapse because you die. I struggled, drugs and alcohol, went to college, got into more drugs, hallucinogenics, ecstasy. Whole life was a party. I came back, got into doing more drugs, and at 21, I checked myself in the Parkside Lodge, one of the best treatment centers, John. I don't know why that place went out of business, but it was damn good. I like treatment. I love treatment. 21 years old, I'm in treatment. But I can remember a guy coming like me and sharing his story, and when he was finished, he looked at about 38 of us as clients, and he said, one of you will be sober here, and a third of you will be dead. And right away, I put up my hand and said, excuse me, sir, there's 38 of us. He said, listen to me, kid, one of you will be sober in a year, and a third of you will be dead. I was the last man standing. And I asked him, I said, what do I do? He said, don't drink, go to those meetings. That's exactly what I did. I used to go to Chris Lake Alamo Club, I went to meetings every day. 3, 4, I started a seal coating business, ran a water ski school in Foxford. My life was great. But then again, I'm the guy that put up my hand and say I'm looking for a sponsor, and nobody would pick on me, and I'd be like, yes, I got away with it again. I didn't need a sponsor, I sponsored myself, I climbed my own guy. And going in and out of the program lasted another 27 years. Ultimately, until a person's had enough pain, they're not going to change. And pain factors are different for different people. You get a DUI, you might quit drinking. You take men and women at 18 years old, we start drinking heavily together. Her life expectancy is 38, mine's 63. Because as women get older, they can't metabolize alcohol the way men can. I was watching at your charts on the drugs, and if Laura and I were the same age doing drugs, I would probably do more than her because my tolerance builds faster. I tried relocating, county jails, consequences. I picked up heroin when I was 32 years old, and I was over a year sober. My life was really good. I was a part owner of a management consulting firm. We just built a beautiful house out in Oswego, ran 35 Cub Scout dens, had a great life. And I kind of worked the steps. And I met a guy at a meeting, asked me to take him to Chicago and move out of his apartment. I did. And as I'm moving Joel out, his roommate Saba pops up. What are you doing there? So I'm moving out Joel. What are you doing? Heroin. You want to do something? Sure. That quick. Because I didn't have the coping skills or life skills to apply. What's one bag of heroin going to do? That one bag of heroin turned into a $500 day habit for 12 months. I've overdosed 8 times. I've been clinically dead 3. I've had 2 heart attacks from cocaine use. I should not be here. That little drug called Narcan saved my life numerous times. And I commend Live for Lolly and Chelsea the Liberté for what they've done. Because that drug, you can go to your Walgreens or CVS and get it across the counter right now. This should be everywhere, it should be in every school. We need to educate kids about a little law called Good Samaritan Law. Who does not know what the Good Samaritan Law is? Everyone in here? I'll start calling on you and see if you really do know what it is. Chris? No. That's a good thing. Yeah, so I'll make that for you. Consequences for me were driving on revokes, going to prison in 08. I can remember getting sentenced to prison on my wife's birthday. I'm going into Stateville Correctional Center. Anyone ever visited that place? Jason, we know you have. I love you, brother. I'm glad to see you here. You locked in a cell 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you don't leave it. It might take you out for a 5-minute shower until you figure out what prison you're getting transferred to. I remember in there, my daughter Abby turned 6 to 7. I couldn't call her. My son Maxwell back there turned 10 to 11. I couldn't call him, and I swore I would never do this again. And I got transferred down to Vienna prison to do my next 45 days, because they give you a year, you do 61 days, and they release you. And I got out and I got home, and my wife sat me down and she said, Tim, I applied for a Dunham scholarship to go to nursing school. I said, man, you don't need to work, I make plenty of money. And she looked right at me and said, Tim, the way you're living, you're gonna end up in 2 places. You're gonna end up dead or back in prison. We got 4 kids to take care of, and I can't rely on you. That lady graduated nursing school, top of her class in 3 years. You think I showed up to her graduation? No, I was dope sick. This Patrick was talking about. When you're dope sick, it's hell on earth. When you're dope sick, you just want to feel normal. You just want to take the sick off. To try to function, to try to get through the day. There's no planning for the future. There's no planning for what the hell you're going to do in the next 2 hours. I promise you, I never wanted to grow up and be a drug addict or alcoholic. I want to be a professional water skiing stuff. That's all I ever wanted to be. My dad would not pay $20,000 for me to go to stuntman school. I tried. So, I got out and I started another business and things were wrong. I went right back to doing what I do. Drugs. Chaos. And then December 16th of 2010, I overdosed by driving. I hit 2 cars. And I put 4 people in the hospital. I could have killed those people. I do not remember it. They do administer an Narcan to me 5 times. I was dead when they showed up on the scene. And the only reason I know that is my silly lawyer said we're going to beat this case because they never got blood or urine and put a paramedic on the stand. Why did he drive my ass? And I can remember my lawyer asking the paramedic as I was fighting my case, he said, how do you know my client was under the influence of heroin? You never got blood or urine. He said, sir, I've been a paramedic 20 years and dealt over 10,000 overdoses. Your client was dead from heroin overdose. I administered Narcan once on nothing, twice nothing, 3 times nothing. And the 4th time I looked at the battalion chief and said, call the coroner, this one's gone. And for some reason he tried it under my tongue and they got a slight pulse and they mainlined it into me. And I remember coming to unless we were in the hospital. I do not remember a thing. And I spent a week in jail and I manipulated my mom and wife into bailing me out. My wife picked me up for the umpteenth time from a jail. We drove home, not a word said. We pulled into the garage, walked into my home office, and I said once again, I'm sorry. She said, Tim, you're sorry out. I don't want to hear you're sorry, so I'm going to bed. And I asked her, I said, do you know where my glasses are? When the airbag went off, I lost my glasses. She said, I went to the van. I got your glasses, your coat's in the closet. And then she walked away. She said, oh, good job, Father of the Year. You do know all our kids' Christmas presents were hidden in the back of the van and half of them are missing. And I don't have money to buy any new ones. And she went up to bed and I went to the closet and got my coat and opened up my coat and there was all the heroin the cops ever found. I went right back to the door. I was in for that. 3 months into fighting my case, no, my kids know I'm a heroin addict. See, with my 17-year-old son Nick, I was not a father to my son, I was a friend. I was a dad that let my son and his buddy smoke weed in the basement and drink. I was dope sick, taking a hot bath, and Nick walked in, he said, "What's wrong, Pops?" I said, "What do you think, you idiot? I'm dope sick." And he threw 2 bags of heroin on the counter. I said, "9 more, Dad. Today's your lucky day." And I got out of the tub and I did those 2 bags. 2 minutes, I felt fine. And I went my son through him. I said, "What the hell are you doing, Nick?" He said, "Don't worry, Dad, I'm just selling it." I said, "Nick, this isn't weed. This is heroin, and you know what this drug has done to me." My son looked right at me and said, "Well, you're a successful drug addict, Dad." I said, "Why would you say that?" "Oh, we got a nice house, he got an office in the Wrigley building, we make a good living." And my son's delusional mind, because I functioned, I was successful. 3 months later, we started doing heroin together. So my son and I bonded, doing drugs. October 30th of 2012, Judge Wattis at 26 in California sentenced me to 7 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections. My 3rd DUI, my 5th driving unrevoked, and they charged me 0.1% of 1 gram of heroin with a spoon stretch. When I walked into Cook County Jail off to prison the 2nd time, I weighed 158 pounds. I was skin and bones, I was walking down. In Stateville, the 2nd time, I defecated and vomited myself for 2 weeks straight in that cell. I did not sleep a wink for a month. 30 days of complete insomnia. Not a bit. That's why I surrendered. So I God, higher power, whatever's up there, take away this obsession and compulsion use, and I swear I will turn my whole life over to you. And please let me get into Sheridan Correctional Center. Son of a bitch, the next day I was getting shipped off to Sheridan. In Illinois, there's only 2 drug treatment programs within the Illinois Department of Corrections system. We have 28 prisons, we have 2 drug treatment programs. By the grace of God, I got into one. Sheridan Prison is run by the West Care Drug Treatment Program, which they run at Cook County Jail. They run it in 8 other states. It's a very peer-driven therapeutic community. It's a very structured environment. I did 30 days in one building, 30 in another, and I got to my final cell. I remember walking in, there's a big black guy sitting there, reading an AA big book. Word for word, I walk in, I said, "Hey man, how you doing?" He looks up at me like I bothered him. He says, "Hey Whitey, you into recovery?" I said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "Because if not, my friend, you're not coming in this cell, because that's all we do on here." I said, "I'm into recovery." He said, "Good, I'm Big Perk, nice to meet you." I said, "Hello, Big Perk, I'm Tim." He said, "I think I'll call you Powder." I said, "You didn't tell me what the hell do you want?" True story. Big Perk was chief of the unknown vice lords for 25 years plus. Spent 23 years behind the wall, 10 different times. Ruthless man. Man outside my life. 18 hours a day in that cell. All we did was study the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. He had a basic text, the Bible. We read hundreds of books. In the day room at night, we'd sit on a bench and have a 12-step meeting. I never got a TV. Lived on $50 a month commissary. Had the kindness of my mother's heart. And counting on the visits every 2 weeks when my wife brought 2 of my kids to visit me. My oldest son was in active addiction. I remember Nick coming to visit me once, high as a kite. It was an ordeal, 6 hours, get the kids, go to the prison, visit dad, leave, but that's how I did my time. I walked out 13.5 months later, after my wife divorced me in prison. That beautiful house we had, we lost in foreclosure, because I couldn't pay the bills, because I spent all the damn money on drugs. Left my kids high and dry, they had to move into their grandmother's house. Nick, Tanner and Max lived in the basement, Abby and Shannon shared a bedroom. Mary had her own room. Shannon picked me up. We went to, her and my mom found me a little townhouse in downtown Naperville for 3 reasons. So I could walk to the Alano Club and go to meetings. I could walk to the train and go to work. And I could walk to Starbucks and go grocery shopping. All the kids came over that night. Shannon came over, got my little yellow lab Cabo. We had Portillo's, and that's the last time I was together with my 4 kids as a family. I went to work, plugged into recovery, got another sponsor, went through the steps. Everything I do today, people get real twisted. I work for a treatment center, I run a foundation, I speak all over the country. That's my job. My recovery is outside of that. I still attend 4 12-step meetings a week. I have a sponsor and I sponsor other people. Recovery is a lifestyle. Going to treatment is just the beginning. Just the beginning. I started turning my life around, started some support groups, came up with this crazy idea to set up this foundation. Started meeting people like Laurie and Chelsea and Chris Reed, who took 6 months to return my call. Started guiding people into treatment. Stumbled into working in the treatment space. I never thought I'd do that. At 19 months over, my son Nick was in treatment for the 6th time. 5th or 6th, I can't keep him straight. Nick liked treatment. Nick loved treatment. Didn't know what the hell to do when he got out. Because there was no sober homes. There was no resources. I remember he was in Serenity House. And Serenity House is a really good sober program, but Nick didn't have cars. So he had to ride a bicycle 15 miles to go to work every day. But if you weren't back by 6 at night, they kick you out. And he didn't get back because it was raining, and they kicked him out. What did he do? Went right back to use it. So unfortunately, we set a lot of people up to fail. And 19 months over, Nick's back in treatment again. I remember him saying, Dad, we got such a crazy story, man, let's go speak and save lives. I said, dude, let's do it. Let's get your ass sober first. Don't worry, Dad, I will. In 30 days out of jail, he's back in, out of treatment, he's back in Cook County Jail, selling bogus pills, trying to buy heroin. Never gave recovery a shot. And did 45 days, got out, Shannon picked him up, took him to Taco Bell, fed him, said, we're done. Not coming to my house, you're not coming to Dad's, because all you do is lie, cheat, and steal. Don't worry, we got it figured out. Me and my girlfriend are getting an apartment. 5 days out of jail, I called Nick and said, come get some Narcan. Don't worry, Dad, I'm not on that bullshit anymore. Friggin' believe it. 2 days later, Shannon called me and said, Nick overdosed, I'm coming to pick you up. We shot to Hinsdale Hospital, ran into the emergency room. Tim and Shannon rang, here's your son Nick, he overdosed, and 30 seconds later, we Chapman. I knew my son was dead. And I'll ask people, what was my next thought? Most people say you want to go get high. No, my next thought was, oh, be in the AA meeting that night. And that's what I did. And I never looked back. And I was surrounded by people like Lauren, a shitload of mothers that brought food to my house for 2 weeks straight. You're a good cook, too. I'll never forget it. And we've had our differences since then. But you know what we have to do if we want to stop burying people? We need to come together. We point the friggin' finger. I was in New York 2 days ago on a show called Barney and Company, speaking on the opiate epidemic. And today I did CNN News and some other daily. What was that thing called, Max?
What, Daily Mail?
Daily Mail. They got 44 million subscribers. I'm getting asked to speak all over, but I tell the truth. Maintenance saves friggin' lives. But who am I to judge someone if they want to be on Suboxone? Not a big methadone proponent, but they're alive, they're not sticking a needle in their arm. And let's not get this twisted. My son never used a needle in his life. He only snorted heroin. And he snorted 2 bags and his buddy gave him a Xanax. About a half hour later, they knew my son was overdosing. They didn't call 911. They panicked. And they went in the basement and did more drugs and left Nick on the sofa and came up an hour later and Nick was dead. Then they put his dead body in the car and drove around with it for 2 hours afraid to go to the hospital. By the time I got to the hospital, my son had been dead 4 to 4.5 hours. And I remember the detective pulling me aside and he said, would you like me to charge these kids with drug induced homicide? I said, no. He said, what do you want? I said, when I get them all in treatment. Nick's girlfriend is now 13 months sober. Gary has done probably 16 stints in treatment. But there's hope. If you have a heartbeat, you have hope. McHenry County, as Patrick said, there ain't shit here. Got Rosecrance, outpatient program, commend them. Got people like Chris Reed fighting tooth and nail. to get sober homes open. And I will promise you, I'm not saying this because Chris is sitting in the room, he runs the most structured sober home in the state of Illinois. It's $100 a week. Is that what it is? Oh, now you're raising your rates. No, I'm picking on, he's got the sober bar. They got sponsors coming in, they got people meeting in. Hell, you were over there having dinner. They cook a pretty good meal, don't they? See, what people, loss and addiction need is connection, compassion. They need people to give a shit about them. This 3 weeks in treatment, out, nowhere to go, you're setting up to fail. You're gonna use. So I've scoured the country looking for places, because 1% of the people I work with will go to my center that I work for. I refer all my adolescents to Rosecrance, Gateway. But then I run this foundation called the Man Recovery Foundation. We have no employees. I do not take a salary. The majority of the money is raised through my speaking events. Everything I get paid for, I charge. So stuff like this. Last year I gave away $93,000. This year it will be over $250,000 of my own money to put people in treatment. So I've got places in South Carolina that I can put people into 4 to 6 month programs. I can get them in. I got one Christian-based program for $625. I got Oaks Recovery for $1,000. I got the Owl's Nest where I send other women that are a little more structured. They're doing IOP now with true therapists for $1,400, and they go through the steps in 30 days, and they work part-time and pay their way through the program. We could bring something like that right here. Give me $1 million, I will have a program set up and running within 6 months that will house 100 people. All I need is $1 million. I'm serious. And the scary thing is there's lots of people around here that have money. I'm meeting with a lady in New York in 2 weeks who's from Kenneally, who was referred to me, whose husband's worth $3 billion. And she wants to donate $2 to $5 million to my foundation to do that exact program. If she does this, I will come and buy a couple farms and open this immediately. But there's another dilemma. There's no detox. There's some hospitals now, Baltimore, they're test marketing it, to where people are overdosing, they're giving them a 7-day script of Suboxone out of the gate. We need to start looking at things like this. Maintenance programs are successful if you have the proper doctor, they're working with the therapist, they're doing some sort of recovery. I don't give a shit what you do. There's 12-step based, there's Christian based, there's smart recovery, there's refuge recovery, which is Buddhist based. Go to church, see a therapist, chase squirrels, and sing Kumbaya. If you're staying sober, do it. Yeah. I don't care. Not for me to judge you or you, because I was a judgmental son of a bitch. But you know what? I gotta go after the data. I'm an educated man, and I know enough that the data speaks for itself. You know what else the data speaks well for? Safe injection sites. Yeah. Safe injection sites save lives. You want to know why? It'd be huge to have one here. Do you want to know why? Because people can't get into treatment. So if they're going to use drugs, let them go to a place where there's nurses and doctors on site. They're getting clean needles. They're not going to spread Hep C or HIV, and God forbid they overdose. Son of a bitch, we can save them. And you know what else? We have a bunch of peer-driven recovery specialists that can talk to them. Try to maybe get them to put their hand up and get on Suboxone or methadone or get into treatment. That's what works. There's a place in South Carolina I went and visited called Healing Place. They have 700 clients. The program's absolutely free, but you know what their detox is? You ride it out for 24 hours, get your ass across the street, take a barf bag, go sit in on 3 meetings, try to eat some food. After a week, you're feeling better, you get in the program. You're in the housing, you walk your ass 2 miles a day to the treatment center. Every day. You got someone in a wheelchair, you push them. This is a peer-driven program. It's a 9-month program. They take them completely through the steps, and it's completely run by people that have graduated the program. How do they fund it? They have people coming out of county jails or getting diverted from prison. That pays half the fees. And then the rest is through private donations. And this stuff works. Because there's structure, there's accountability, and it's longer term. 3 weeks of treatment is an absolute joke. Needs to be at least 90 days minimum. Even if they expand the beds from 16 to 32, they will be full in 24 hours. It's still a 12-week wait without good insurance to get in. I know how to backdoor people, and you do. We know how to pull the strings, but with all the way out programs and the Safe Passages Initiative and all this, we're just running out of beds. And people are scrambling. I've got Sycamore and DeKalb County that want to get on board with the Safe Passages Initiative. Out of Dixon, we put together, and we gotta make sure we have beds. We cannot put this program in place and set people up to fail. I do not want someone coming into this police station, getting taken to her hospital, detox, and we don't have a bed for them. We are setting people up to fail. You have a 12 to 36 hour window when someone puts their hand up, we need to be able to give them some help. But we need to drop the stigma of this shit. We need to all come together, and there's people that are good at specific things. This shit this Live for Lolly does, I want nothing to do with it. And they're very good at it. They're very good at it. I like dealing with people on the damn streets. I've done 1,500 interventions. I've had 4 people not go to treatment. 4. Why? Because I just sit there and share my experience, strength, and hope. I break them down until they're ready to go. But then I gotta get them in. Most of these people have no resources. And those are most of the people I help. I commend you, Pat, for what you're doing, what you're trying to bring here to our community. Rosecrance and everyone else, Integra Hospital. I'd like to put your ass out of business. You just deal with old people right now. You know? It's crazy. I mean, I think Madison County and McHenry County have the highest overdose in the state of Illinois. Madison County, down in the middle of, it's kind of like McHenry County, but it's in southern Illinois. We're all sick of burying people. There's family members I know in here right now that have lost loved ones. And I commend you for coming out and trying to be part of the solution. Amy, you just lost a family member within the past hour, didn't you? I'm sorry. We need to quit judging each other. We need to quit talking about each other. This, that, my ego is bigger than yours. We're a friggin' community that's sick and tired of burying people. And we need to come together. You build a village with a shitload of people. Not 1 or 2. I've made some mistakes with some people I brought in. It's all learning lessons. Oh, I actually got a call from a guy by the name of Mike Young 2 weeks ago. I don't talk to that son of a bitch at 16 months. What's up, Mike? Tim, how you doing? I'm good, Mike. How are you? And he starts crying. So I'm in a sober home out in Boston. And I owe you a huge amount of time. Mike, you don't owe me anything. All I want you to do is stay clean and sober. And he's doing that for today. I don't harbor resentments. It's the way people were at that time, and that's okay, and we push on and move forward. I'll never forget the day my son died. Mike Young was there for me. We brought 10 people down to an AA meeting in Naperville and supported me like Laura and all these other moms. I'll never forget that. So who am I to judge Mike or anyone else? I'm grateful the son of a bitch is alive and I get to talk to him every day. That's what recovery's about. Forgive. We need to forgive ourselves. We need to quit blaming and friggin' help each other here. That's why I owe you amends out of it. This is your community. This is our community. Let's pull this shit together. Start being a big loud voice, dropping the stigma, supporting the families that have lost loved ones. Try not to see our kids go away to prison for the rest of their lives for making some bad choices. Get on the recovery road. If I can get sober, any side of Michigan, I promise you that. Not quite talking, because I can talk for hours. But what I will do, Rufus, you're already on the phone. Look at that. That's my son Rufus, Maxwell, my 19-year-old.
Derek brought it up.
Derek, you're a good guy. But when we're over, if anyone wants, I did publish a book, David. It's a powerful book. It's my story, but it will give you hope. But if you have a loved one in addiction, you'll understand why they do what they do. So take one of those and I'll quit talking. How's that?
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Not only for speaking here tonight, but for living your life in an effort to save others. And for living as an example. And by the way, congratulations on your anniversary yesterday.
5 years sober, yes.
Wow.
I just have to, before we take our break, I just have to share this tiny little story with you because it's just one of those little, I don't know what higher power or God you all believe in, but I do believe in God. And I'm also very active in the recovery community here in Crystal Lake. And when I say recovery, I don't mean just drugs, I mean alcohol is a drug too. So, and I heard that there was this documentary on A&E that had some people in it that I might know. And so I went on my on demand and I watched this A&E thing. And I saw a few people in a few places that I recognized. And I saw Tim Ryan. And I saw what he did day in and day out, which is to get people into treatment. And I said I want him for this event. And at 8 a.m. the next morning, he was confirming it. And he said, I'll do it for free. I'm from Crystal Lake. I'll do it for free. And so I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you were meant to speak here. And I know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, you're meant to be doing what you're doing. And God has a purpose for you. And thank you. And we do have Doreen here from Laurie, who is going to be doing a demonstration/training. For those of you who are interested, we're going to take a 15-minute break where you can grab some food in the kitchen, stretch your legs, go do your thing. We'll be back in 10 or 15 minutes. Those who train with Doreen will leave with a packet of Narcan tonight while supplies are out. So we'll see you back here for the panel portion in about 10 to 15 minutes. Just waiting and So as we begin the panel discussion, we'd just like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that all of the views that you've heard here tonight, all the views represented here, are those of the individuals themselves, and Algonquin Township as an entity does not make any endorsements of the views expressed during this event as a whole. With that, I'd like to welcome back State's Attorney Kenneally, McHenry County Coroner Dr. Majewski, and Tim Ryan, as well as introduce our additional panelists, Director of Operations for Live for Lawley, Smart Recovery Advocate, mother of a child in recovery from substance use disorder. Please welcome Laura Fry. With 8 years in recovery from drugs and alcohol, co-founder of New Directions, also known as NDARS, here in McHenry County, operating 2 sober homes as well as a sober bar called The Other Side in Crystal Lake. Please welcome Chris Reed. McHenry County Substance Abuse Coalition volunteer since 2007. Illinois Opioid Education Advisory Board member and addiction recovery advocate. Please welcome Laurie Crain. And last but not least, Rosecrance Treatment Center Administrator of Regional Behavioral Health. Please welcome Clark Lawson. And at this time, before we get started with the questions and answer discussion portion, if any of the new panelists that I just introduced would like to go around and make some brief remarks about yourself to introduce yourself, then we'll move into the discussion portion, and where I will turn it over to our moderator here, my fellow trustee, David Chapman.
All right, any newbies?
Do I just talk?
Wow, isn't it?
Whoa, I thought maybe I had to push this.
No.
Hello, this is a really nice group for the first time in McHenry County. Thank you everyone for coming. I work for Live for Lolly, which is an advocacy organization in Arlington Heights. We do a lot of different things. We have peer-to-peer support groups for both those contemplating recovery or those in recovery for their loved ones. We have a grief group for those that have lost, and our co-founder Jody has an Angel Moms group that she runs. I also have a son, 4 years in remission from heroin use disorder, and I am a person in long-term recovery, 35 years from cocaine, crack, all that stuff.
I guess that's all I have to say.
How can I follow up to that?
Yeah.
You
That's
can't.
you and not me.
No, you
really don't
have
have
your
to
cough button. If you need a cough, you just push this.
Oh, you have to be
I feel so important. So my name is Clark Lawson. I'm one of the addictions therapists at Rosecrance. My primary role is, I used to do evening intensive outpatient programs, but we felt that as we've seen the progression of addiction, we really need to get them younger. My primary role is from the District 300 schools, and we also operate in District 155. We provide the substance use services as well, and we really try to educate people in the schools. I do a lot of presentations to families, community outreach to make sure that they realize that this is not going away. We really need to be proactive instead of reactive. So with Rosecrance for about 4 years, really love what I'm doing, and it's great hearing other guys' speeches and testimonies, and I'm really glad there's a lot of people that show support in the community. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Clark.
So I am the director for the coalition. Really, I'm just a staff member. The coalition is run by about 190 different people who attend and participate in activities we're doing. We represent about 60 agencies in the community who are all focused on substance abuse. And what I think is interesting about the McHenry County Substance Abuse Coalition, and I have people who attend others, and they'll agree with me, we've been very successful at what Tim is suggesting, which is we've got to work together. And so what's kind of interesting is when you come in through our doors, you might be Rosecrance, you might be Gateway, but when you hear your McHenry County Substance Abuse Coalition looking at our community and what our needs are. And so I think that we've been very successful at changing some of the conversation and how we work together. And you said, ending some rights that have been around in the community in all levels to try and really tackle this the way we need to. I've been doing prevention education work for about 12 years now, 5 of it to substance abuse in a broader spectrum. So very excited to be here, grateful to have the opportunity.
Laurie, is there an event on November 8th?
There is indeed, and there's sheets back. I put them on Live for Lolly's table because I wasn't sure where to put them, so there's sheets back here. We have Sam Quinones coming. He wrote the book Dreamland, which is kind of a discussion of how the opioids, as Pat indicated, how did they kind of come together, this drug cartel and the pharmaceutical medical world, how did they crash into each other in a way that created the perfect storm. And so he is there to present at 6:30, Crystal Lake South High School next Wednesday.
Sam's really powerful too. I actually did an event with him last year in Springfield. We're both the keynotes, and he's got an interesting perspective, but it actually started in Portsmouth, Ohio, and we were out there. We did an event 8 months ago in Portsmouth, and it's amazing with what's going on. And his background as a reporter, the detail, it's well worth attending.
And we looked at it as, sometimes we gotta know where we started to know how to solve it. We need to work our way back out, and so this is a conversation we need to get in our community about, this is how we got here, and it's not gonna be one trick that's gonna pull us back out. Too many people came together at the same time, and too many people are needed to get us back out. So that's kind of our thought of having him here. He is a great presenter, you're welcome.
I'm Chris Reed. forgive me, a little delirious at this point. I started this morning at Hyman Middle School and carried the afternoon over to Cary Grove health class and came straight here. I started my personal journey in recovery in 2009. I got sober from heroin addiction and kind of fell into a role at New Directions as the president. We started this sober bar in Crystal Lake, which really just kind of happened because they have a construction company and a handful of us just started hanging out there on the weekends and it turned into 5, 10, 15, 20 and there's 30 drug addicts hanging out in the warehouse every night of the week. So it turned into a sober bar and that has progressed. We helped we partnered with Live for Lolly years ago and we're the initial agency that got the Lawson training going with the sheriff's department and then, everything kind of went from there. And we recently just opened a couple of sober living houses, one in both in Crystal Lake, a women's house and a men's house. We actually were awarded funding that too last week actually for from the mental health board to open up an additional house, which is great. And we were already in the process of opening our third, so that kind of just all happened at once. So we should have 4 houses in the next 6 months, which is pretty exciting for us. But yeah, we'll leave it to you guys to ask some questions.
And now for the audience members, if you'd like to ask them directly a question, you can come right up to the microphone. If not, I'll read the ones that are here, but I'll give you all a chance. All right. The microphone
You changed your mind.
scary to us. Yeah. For those 4 of you, could you tell us where your funding comes from? We'll start with Laura.
Well, up until about a year ago, it was all private donations. We had recently got a couple of grants, one of them right here in McHenry County, so you all will be seeing a lot of me. We're going to be starting a naloxone outreach program out on the street, going to users, passing it out, stopping death. So that's what I was going to say.
Thank you.
We have integrated funding where we accept state funded insurance as well as commercial insurance. We also have programs that are funded by the mental health board living in McHenry County. If they do not have any type of insurance, we try to link them with a navigator to make sure we can get them state funded insurance as well. If they are not working, we have an eligibility waiver in which we can link them to services. Quite frankly, I think that's where everything gets convoluted is it needs to be quality care rather than marginal profit. So we try to really delegate to make sure we can service everybody.
Thank you, Clark.
The coalition was privately funded up until 4 years ago when we received a drug-free community grant. That grant is issued by the Office of National Drug Control and monitored by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Agency. And that amount is about $125,000. And right now we're also required to show a community matching amount of $125,000. So our partners all kind of contribute, whether it's time, resources, talents, it all comes together.
Cool.
Yeah, most of the, we get our funds from a few different areas, unfortunately, memorial funds. I just had a family reach out to me, the mother sent me an email and said our son died and we heard about your foundation and we have the memorial funds donated. That's where a portion of our money comes from. We've got a couple grants from the city of Naperville, $23,000, I think a $13,000 one, but the majority of the money comes from my professional speaking events. Every dollar, I charge a minimum $5,000 for speaking events, and every dollar goes into the foundation, and I give every dollar away. I do not take a salary. We have no employees. But it's got to the point where I've added on some key board members, and one gentleman's been with the Make-A-Wish Foundation for 25 years, and he looked me straight in the eyes and he said, we can do all these fundraisers and
5K walks and runs, we're gonna get it from private donors and from bigger foundations, and they're gonna help us start doing that because I do everything myself. Every person I buy a ticket for, or I do everything. I send an email to my board, I wanna send this one here, they approve it, but I do everything, and I can't keep doing it. So we're adding some people on to help get us to the next level, so I can be like Chris Reed one day. Well, Chris is my hero. I'm very proud of him.
Okay, comes all from this burning resentment that he has, because he called me like the day he got out of prison, and was like, "My name's Tim Ryan, I'm a man in recovery." I'm like, "Who is this guy?" And I didn't call him after like a week.
6 months.
Of course, the McHenry County Coroner's Office is funded by the taxpayers of McHenry County. Thank you very much. Your money is wisely spent and really needed to make sure that way we can help families understand what happened to their loved ones. I hate the word closure. I don't think anyone ever gets closure, but you need to have some seed planted that helps them understand what happened, how it happened, to at least give them a component of peace.
The McHenry County State Attorney's Office is also funded by the tax levy. There's one funding stream that I'd like to point out, which is forfeiture funds. So in circumstances where somebody gets arrested for any type of drug possession charge, and there are materials or accessories that are used in as part of that drug transaction, those can be forfeited. This is something that has sort of been getting a lot of news lately. The ACLU has come out and says that we are depriving people without due process of law, things of that nature. We can talk a little bit more about it, but much of that fund, all of that funding needs to be used for drug abatement measures. So to facilitate people getting into treatment, a large share of the forfeiture dollars that we spend actually go to the Way Out program to fund people who otherwise wouldn't be able to get into treatment, as well as to fund various other things that are associated with that program. So, so that's one thing so other than the tax levy, that's about, I'd say, $120,000 every single year. That is an important funding stream, especially for many of the efforts that are being pursued by the State Attorney's Office as well as government agencies to sort of stem the tide.
We're opening a treatment center at the Seas Bull Valley Mansion.
Right, maybe once we get the offers on that. I think we can do better than that.
So prior to 2016, we were all self-funded fundraiser, private funding. Really just kind of like mom and pop fundraising. We brought in some money for just the income generated at the other side, and friends and family donations really. In 2016, we started getting funding from the McHenry County Mental Health Board, and then some other larger private funds.
Thanks. Chris, we'll start off the question with you. Tim, I think you described it, but that's all right. Chris, what does it feel like to be addicted to heroin?
So I know it's a pretty broad question, but so there's initially it's a pretty good feeling. So it's hard to actually describe the use of opioids and kind of what that feeling is that's produced, but it's pretty euphoric, almost like I don't know, when you take a blanket out of the dryer, right, and it's like really warm, right? That feeling, just kind of like throughout your whole body times, I don't know, 15 or 20, and it's just like, there's just nothing that can kind of rock you off your center. It's just a happy, euphoric feeling, but that quickly fades away as you move towards, active addiction, and then it really is a pretty miserable experience because it doesn't take long for you to get to the point to where you're just maintaining, right? You're just maintaining a certain level of opiates or use to where you're just feeling normal. You're not even necessarily getting high. And at that point, you know, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, everything deteriorates on a pretty rapid pace. And everything in your life really pretty much goes out the window. So there's you go from a very good feeling to life being in complete shambles and in a very short amount of time. So you know, that's probably one piece to that answer. There's probably a lot of other different ways you can answer that question, but as far as the emotional feeling, it's pretty detrimental.
Tim, I mean, you've been there, done that. A warm blanket.
Yeah, you know what I was talking about.
You know, I don't, when I speak, especially to kids and high school students or whatever, I never glamorize opiates. With that first bag of heroin, that's what I thought I was looking for. And I can remember at first, it was one bag and I could work and I had all this energy. But I can remember 3 weeks later, when I got sick the first time, I didn't know I was dope sick. And it's 90 degrees and I'm out in a chair puking and shaking. And my guy called and he said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Man, I've got the flu awfully." He said, "Have you been buying heroin since you met me?" I said, "Well, yeah, your other friend comes by every day, but he didn't come by today." And he came by, and an hour later, he gave me one bag of heroin and I did it. And I felt like $1 million. I said, I can never run out. But that's how quickly it took over. But yeah, no, it's a euphoric that you can't even compare, but it is such a damn dragon and monster, almost immediately, if not immediately. And it will take over every friggin' aspect of your life. You will live to use and use to live, and that's it.
Yeah. Wow, yeah, and here's an appropriate follow-up. What does it feel like to you when you say, "I can't stop doing it"? I mean, at some point, that addiction that you talked about lets you do anything except, you know, you just want that next hit.
Well, that's such an open-ended question because there's so many other variables involved. Shame, guilt, remorse, am I hiding it? Do people not know? See, I hid it from my wife for a year. And then I went up to the methadone clinic and I called her and said, "Honey, I'm a heroin addict, but I'm on methadone. I'm gonna be great now." And she was the one that 4 months later said, "You're very angry, you gotta get off." Nobody wants to be an addict, but a lot of people up until now with some of the programs going on, they didn't know they could get help. You're alone. And there's such a movement with people in recovery now, coming out and being proud to be in recovery and talking about it. We need to drop the stigma of the 12-step-based rooms, in my opinion. Everyone hides in the rooms. How the hell am I supposed to know you're a doctor, a lawyer, a principal, a truck driver? If I don't know you're 8 years sober, 12 years sober, how the hell am I gonna look up to you? So that's a stigma in itself. That's my own personal opinion. That's why I tell everyone I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. You know what? It held my ass accountable walking out of prison. Because I jumped feet first into this recovery thing and I could not make a mistake. And shit, 5 years later, I'm still here, so I'm just getting started.
I guess it was different for me. I think a lot of people reach a position in their life to where I know I did, to where drugs and alcohol, it's very apparent that you cannot live life with drugs and alcohol anymore. But living sober seems like an equally impossible feat, right? So it's I can't live life with drugs and alcohol anymore. I've exhausted every option, right? But I can't live sober, right? So for me, that was like kind of my jumping off place, right? It was like, what could I do at that point? You know, so for a lot of people, I know for me, it was like suicide seemed like a pretty good option because it was like I really didn't feel like I could continue to use anymore. Or live, you know, and I just had found so much of a solution in drugs and alcohol, not just heroin, right? I mean, we're here talking about opiates and opioids, but the overall topic is addiction, really, and for me it was everything, and I had to live life with substances as my solution to life. You know, for me, opiates, heroin, work the best. And for me to give up that solution seemed impossible. And if I am gonna give up that solution, right, what is it that you're gonna provide me that is equal to or greater than the previous solution? It's, I didn't know that thing. So,
I'm going to stick with Tim with this question. Your presentation was very poignant, and the question is, have your children forgiven you? How about your ex?
My ex is my best friend, and I do not call her my ex. She's my former better half. I talk to Shannon every day. I love her unconditionally. She is my best friend in the world. My 19-year-old son, Max, is he here? Is he hiding out with Derek somewhere? There's Rufus. And Max spends about 80 hours a week with me. He's my full-time driver. I pay him a lot of money to drive his dad around, and he takes pictures, and we travel all over the country together. Everywhere I go to speaking events, he goes with me. My 18-year-old son works for me. When our son Nick died, I sat Shannon, Max, Tanner, and Abby down, and I said, "You guys blame me for Nick dying. And maybe I should have Max stand up and answer the question." Yeah. All right. We'll go up to the podium now, son.
So, when it came to forgiving my dad, I had to think about a few things. One being, has he genuinely changed? Because growing up, he was always there for me as a father. We don't hang out. He was absent-minded, but he wasn't an absent father. He was always there. And I had to ask if he truly changed. And initially getting out, I didn't want to hear sorry. And when he got out of prison, I didn't want to hear sorry. I didn't want to hear any of that. What I wanted was a change in action. That's the best sorry someone can give you. And so, at first, I let everything, I just kind of left everything out in the open, wanted to see what would happen. And then he started helping people. He started talking to people. He started reaching out, and he really dug into his recovery. And the change that I saw in him and what he did for everyone else, that was enough of an apology. Because I may not be able to get what I lost in my childhood, but at least now he can give many other families their children back, their loved ones, many more years of love with their loved ones. And granted, I lost out on a little bit of that, but now I get to spend every single day with my dad. I get to travel the country helping people with him. And there really isn't any better apology than seeing the change that has happened in my dad. So I wholeheartedly
On that, you know, I asked when Nick died, I asked all the kids, and Shannon, do you blame me? And every one of them said, if you would have, this would have happened 3 years ago, hell yeah. But Dad, you're 21 months sober. You and Mom were the only ones trying to help Nick since you got out of prison. No, we don't blame you. Nick chose to go use again. He's going to disease of addiction. It's as simple as that. No, my kids are my world.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Dr. Majewski, how many people have died of drug overdoses so far this year in McHenry County?
It was 65 2 days ago when I shaped up the PowerPoint. It is now 70 with 2, and that's total. And of those 70, 58 confirmed opioid.
I noticed, again, this question is for you. The question is, I noticed that suicides are also up. Is there a direct relationship between suicides and the opioid addictions?
No. As I pointed out, it's interesting in our county, it's sad but interesting, that of our 34 suicides, there were only 3 that were drug overdose related. As far as people, though, who have substance abuse disorder, there is a much greater risk for suicide. So one of the primary risk factors of someone who may take their life is having a substance abuse disorder. Chris mentioned it. What was his out? Thinking, I think I will take my life because it can get that bad.
And a lot of times it happens when they're dope sick. I had a gentleman that was coming to my support group. I got a call 2 months ago from Rosecrance Hospital. I said, would you OD? He said, no, I was kicking heroin. I tried to hang myself and I broke my neck.
Which is unusual though, to break your neck hanging yourself, that's a very violent thing.
Yeah.
Rarely is there,
And it was kicking opiates. That's why the hell didn't you call me? I would've got you into treatment. He said, I just wanted that.
and he might have had a seizure, you
Yeah,
don't know.
exactly,
Because
but
to
he
break
pulled
your
through,
neck
but-
hanging is
Yeah.
rare. But as far as people, with suicide, now, might they take some sort of drug to help them relax, to, change their impulse control? Absolutely. So they may take Benadryl, they may use some, opioid that they have, they may, use alcohol. Rarely though, I've never seen in my 5 years, a case where someone actually used heroin, as a kind of a pre-medication, prior to taking their life.
This next question will also go to you, is how do they make powder fentanyl?
I think these drug dealers can make anything. Everything has the basis, in, another form of the drug. So if you take, a chemical structure, and that chemical structure is pulverized, you can turn that, it's a powder. So there's fentanyl now that are found as little dots on paper that looks like LSD. And we tracked that the other day. We have a case where we're concerned about that because there were little tiny pieces of paper. So if you're going to take any form and disguise it in something else, anything can be done. Anything.
You gotta understand too, if you take a couple halfway smart people, they could go to the local stores and make fentanyl in their house. It's not that difficult to make. Or you can get on the dark net or the dark web, and I can order an ounce of fentanyl right now and have it shipped to my house in 2 weeks for less than $3,000. That's how accessible it is.
Wow. Patrick, let's move to you. The question to you is, what do I do with leftover prescription drugs?
Yes, that's a great question. Every police department in McHenry County will accept those drugs, so I would encourage you that anybody who, or any drugs that is left over in medicine cabinets, grandma's medicine cabinet or otherwise, be brought to really any police department there is. Roy Crain, I'm sure, is gonna jump on here when I'm done speaking, so I'm gonna be here to lunch. There is a company which now has admixture that you can put into prescription drugs. It's grass-based, and I'll let her talk about it, but you can put it in a prescription drug and it deactivates the opioid compounds or the opioid elements of any drug, and it can also be safely disposed in the toilet, sink, whatever the case may be, because it's non-toxic. So that's important, and that's something that you're going to be seeing more of as we distribute it. The last thing that I'll mention with respect to that is part of what we did at the McHenry County Substance Abuse Coalition, I'd say about 5-6 months ago, was we authored legislation which would allow police departments to burn prescription opioids that are not collected pursuant to an investigation. So for the brief little expanse, and I'll stop talking. So all police departments have these things called burn barrels, where they burn up all of the drugs that they get, whether it's marijuana, heroin, medication, whatever the case may be. But they can only use those burn barrels pursuant to IEPA rules if those drugs are collected pursuant to an investigation. So those drugs that are turned over would just have to sit in evidence for upwards to a year's time, and in police departments there could be up to 60 to 100 pounds of opioid prescriptions that are just sitting around an evidence locker. We've had some problems, if any of you have been reading the newspaper over the last 2 years, of some of these evidence lockers being raided by police officers who are then either using them themselves or selling them. But in addition to that, it inhibits the police's ability to continue to collect prescription opioid pills. So what the legislation allows is that the police now can burn any of the drugs, and it doesn't have to be collected pursuant to an investigation. Thank you. Laurie?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much covered it there. So, I I think that, the immediacy of getting rid of the meds is one of the big things. And so the company he's referring to is DisposeRx. I don't have them on me, but if you're interested, you can take one of my cards, email me, and I can send you a sample of it. We're working with them really closely because, and I'll leave this up here, you can come and look at it. It creates this gelatinous thing that literally within 30 seconds, any medication, you can't extract the compounds. So, especially if you're in a house where you've got your opioid prescription, you know, you go get your tooth pulled, they give you 30, you need one, get rid of the other 29. And this then can sit in your cupboard or for the month if you don't get over to a PD, but then we encourage you to get rid of it at the PD anyway, just so that it's gone, and we're doing the environmentally sound thing, incinerating. But I think that we're looking at that for things like hospice. Coroner and I are working together to try and provide larger versions of that, because hospice is one of those locations where heavy-duty meds, lots of them, lots of times a long history of heavy-duty meds sitting around. And so we've heard about hospice nurses being targeted when people know there's someone in treatment there. People read the obituaries and raid the houses when the people are at the funeral home. So something like this, the nurse can do it. And when the family's done with the funeral, when they're done with that situation and the stress is gone, they can go get rid of it when they have time. But immediately it becomes a non-issue. 80% of kids who start on medications as an opioid get their stuff from family and friends. That's the first place they go. So they might, you hear this, you know, Johnny had knee surgery and they got a prescription and now all of a sudden. That was normal use, but if they have that piece of them that then moves it into something else, that's the next place they go. They raid their own cabinets, their grandparents' cabinets, their aunts and uncles, their neighbors, realtors' open houses, another good place for people to go and access it. So getting stuff out of the cabinet is vital to us really starting to get a hold on new users at this level.
Right, and do not put things down the toilet. We don't want things in our water supply. That's why people have worked so hard to get drop boxes at the police, some of the pharmacies, the coroner's office. Do not put things down the toilet. But once you have any prescription that is no longer used by you or any family member, get it out of the home immediately.
Yeah, I was a trustee at Cary, and I just can't tell you how much was coming out of the sewer system. Full pill bottles, drugs, just all kinds of it. And you came up with a good point, Laurie, about open houses. So if you know somebody that's having an open house, one of the new tricks that they've come up with is the addicts will go to the open house, and the first place they go is your bathroom. My niece has a little boy, and she walked up to a house and she said, knocked on the door and said, I know I don't know you, but my son needs to go to the bathroom. Can he use your bathroom? Oh, of course. And Jesse rifled through and took the drugs out of that person who she didn't even know. So it can be anybody and it can be anything. So this one is going to be to everybody, and you talked about it, Tim, about how can we combat the stigma that addicts and alcoholics are bad people.
Can I share a story?
Sure.
So, we're working with Albany Heathen School right now. Their 5th through 8th graders are actually writing books. The 5th through 7th graders are writing one on what are gateway drugs, and the 8th graders are writing specifically about what opioids are. And they're meeting with professionals to talk about these different things. And I think this was the perfect example. Pat was there talking to them about what happens in the legal system. And he, devil's advocate, not his real stance, was kind of going with the stance of, let's just take the junkies and throw them in the prison and we'll put them away for the thing. And the one boy raises his hand right away and he goes, why would you say that? This is a disease. And I sat in the back of the room and I was like, the whole effort is worth it. Because I think we need to start with, it's a disease, and break that off. And be able to get people to understand, if you need medication as a diabetic, you get medication. If you need insulin for that time until you can stabilize your eating habits to a way that you don't need it, you need it. And we need to start accepting that that's part of it, and it's not this every day. But I think, for me, the conversation has to start younger. To me, it's a little bit like racism and some of the other transgender issues and things like that people don't want to talk about. As adults, we're pretty set, and it's pretty hard to change that. But younger kids, they're so open to a conversation about people just have problems. And everybody has their own, or they have an issue that makes them different. I think kids are much more open to accepting this. The other thing, and I'm not in the recovery, so I might be speaking out of turn, is I think there's stigma within our own community if you're AA versus NA. And what does that look like if you're an opioid user and so forth. We need to break it down within that wall as much as we do the general community. So.
Man, I'll agree with you 1,000%
I
there.
just said ladies first.
I didn't know you were going. Here comes the stigma. It's called a substance misuse disorder. It is.
Thank you. I think talking younger and all of us being able to stand up wherever we are and say, I am a person in long-term recovery. And I will just maybe put one foot on my soapbox, don't kill me, Tim. And you were looking at me, you know exactly what I was thinking. Language. We all need to change our language. I am a cancer survivor. You would never call me a cancer. So why do we call these people addicts? They are much more than their disease. Labels belong on jars, not people. So when I talk about my son, I say that he is in remission from heroin use disorder, much like I'm in remission from cancer. I could relapse tomorrow, so could he. Okay, off soapbox.
I'm an enigma. No, it's carrying the verbiage on everything. AA versus NA, smart recovery, refuge. Who gives a shit? If you're trying to change your life and be a better person, and you might slip and fall, I have to learn to meet people where they're at. If you want to call yourself this, King Squirrel, you're King Squirrel. I don't care. But we need more people in recovery being proud to be in it and drop the mask. You know, Ryan Hampton is doing huge things with the Voices Project and getting, you know, he had me do a thing for my anniversary and, you know, I'm living in long-term recovery. You know, that's what I do. So, yeah, you gotta talk about it. You know, I had an epiphany after my son died. And when we used to live in Oswego, man, we knew all the neighbors. And you know, when Nick would get out of treatment, if we actually weren't embarrassed and we told the neighbors that he was struggling, and maybe they saw him slipping, they would have said something. But we didn't tell anyone, we kept our little deep, dark secret. My wife never told anyone that I was a heroin addict. She always made excuses and covered up for me and lied for me. The truth will set you free. How you treat people with love and grace and speak the truth, whether they like it or not. That's what I do, I tell the truth. Sometimes it hurts.
I think forums like this help people come out, people who maybe may have experienced loss or substance abuse disorder themselves, or want to educate themselves. I always say, you know, in our beautiful little McHenry County, we have things just as bad and per capita worse than Lake County, than DuPage County, not Cook County, but we have a true problem with overdose, with opioids, with fentanyl, with heroin. So it's right here, right in our county, and that's why we're here tonight. So I think the more people read about it and talk about it, it will become more acceptable. And it is very interesting that Laurie is really a dynamo as far as getting into the schools and getting to people younger and younger. I'm only asked by one school that is in the middle school years to talk there in my 5 years. But I've been asked to come back every year, and I spend the entire day there the last day after 7th grade. more of the high schools, will ask people to come in. And Laurie though is getting us into more and more places. So I think that the schools, want to recognize that this is a problem too, because there are many things that the schools don't allow you to talk about.
What?
I can slip them in because I'm coming to talk about death investigation, so I've got to slip in overdose, suicide, things like when you brought up about Good Samaritans. I always ask them, are you your brother's keeper? Absolutely. We're all our brother's keepers. Sometimes the teacher twists their face and then I just keep going.
I want to chime in on that because it's, every school I speak in, every high school throughout this country, less than 1% of the students know the Good Samaritan laws. Less than 1%. I have superintendents and principals that don't know what the hell the Good Samaritan law is. Who's going to be at parties using drugs? The school students. You know, we did a program last night at Wheaton North High School, and we have Rosecrance, Matt Quinn, he's my buddy, CDH, and after the event, Matt Quinn came up to me and he said, "This is the most powerful presentation I've ever seen." He said, "You know, we've done a number of events with herein, and nobody came to my table." He said, "I had 30 families come up to me tonight for an hour." And I said, "What's the difference?" He said, "You're actually providing solutions. You're not just telling a story." And we're talking about cell phone monitoring software, computer monitoring software, how to drug test, why to drug test. Here's the avenues. If you have insurance, no insurance, good insurance. Here's support groups. Here's Al-Anon. Here's smart repair. People don't know where the hell to go. They go to Google. So it's providing the full wrap around it and hitting the kids young. I mean, they're stranger danger. I was taught that since I was this young. Why aren't we talking kids about it? They know about it. So.
I hate to interrupt, but we have reached the end of our scheduled program. However, we do have several more questions, so I'm going to leave it up to the audience. Do we hold, because I don't want to end such a great conversation, do we hold our panelists hostage for 5 more questions? Or do we let them go?
Hold on.
All right, we continue on. You are now held hostage. Sorry, Jim.
Well, we could save some lives and I think, all right.
Chris, no point.
Thank you for being here. Yes, you want to come up to the microphone?
Yeah, please. All right.
Mine is in direct to what you were saying about, with, heroin and how it is related to suicide. How you were saying how you didn't see it with suicide. My question is, how is mental health related to heroin?
I think that there's a fine line between anyone who has an addiction and cannot escape that addiction and know that if they're going to use something, they have a risk of dying, to actually differentiate between what really is an everyday suicide versus an accident. So in my office, I might declare it an accident, but in that user's mind, they know, some of them know. It is is the interaction. I'll be interested to see what you say, that they know that every time that they use, they potentially can kill themselves. Now, there are though a component of people who use that say, I know how to use. I know how to use, and I use, and I know I'm going to be okay. I use that amount, and I tell other people how to use. And I say, that might be with that dealer, with that drug that you had. You don't know what you're getting today anymore. You don't know if this heroin is more pure. You don't know if the percentage of fentanyl is higher. You don't know if you have an analog there. I contest that I don't think people are out there saying, hey, I'd like a pack that has like a lot of fentanyl in there, because you'd be asking for death. So there's a fine line between that.
Can you directly tell whether any of those tests are a mental health issue?
Oh, absolutely. That people who have a substance disorder often have anxiety disorder, depression, and it's the chicken or the egg, as Mr. Ryan said. people have anxiety, depression, that puts them at greater risk for substance abuse disorder, but then you have substance abuse disorder, well, aren't you gonna be anxious, aren't you gonna be depressed? As far as bipolar, I think that is a whole different set of people, so, not a psychiatrist, but I look at them in a different light, but nonetheless, they may medicate on and off, and their impulse control may make them at greater risk for using.
And if I could
So-
piggyback on that, Jolene, thanks for bringing that up. Gabor Mate, who's one of my personal favorites too, talks about trauma and childhood trauma. And personally, that's what led me to risky situations and my own addiction, childhood trauma. And sometimes things can be very traumatic to us as children that our adults in our lives might not think are traumatic. So I think that is where a lot of it comes from.
Majority of the people that struggle with substance abuse have underlying mental health issues, it's just a fact.
Dr. Majewski, when someone dies, do you have access to their medical records? You could see all the
Yes,
prescriptions
yes,
that have been done?
yes, I can look at their entire medical record, I can talk with every physician, look at every, the history of prescription use, yes.
All right, thank
Many
you.
addicts are self-medicating. They're never truly diagnosed by a psychiatrist saying you're bipolar, you're this. They've been
Right,
self-medicating.
with alcohol, with benzos, with other people's drugs, right.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Charlene, and I'm a former board member with Not No More. And I'm here with a group of moms that is SNAP, Mothers Against Addiction Clubs, and my daughter Jolene. My son Jeff has fought an 18-year battle with addiction, and he fought a really hard battle for a long time. We fought a hard battle, our whole family did. And sadly, we said goodbye to Jeff in August of 2016. And I just wanted to give thanks to Tim for coming out and taking Jeff to treatment a couple of times, and again for contributing to taking care of his final arrangements. And then to Ann for being there at a time when I can't express this woman's compassion that you have for families. It was amazing. Issues during the time that we fought the battle. One was he was the dual diagnosis, and we talked about that, met with us moms a couple weeks ago. And one of the things that was a big issue was that he was diagnosed and put back out on the streets and not given any, go to the doctor appointments by himself. As a mom, you're going and giving him a ride there and you're following him around, telling everybody that my son's an addict, do not prescribe this kind of stuff. What can we do to have them? They're mentally not capable of taking care of themselves. Can we get to the point where they have to have an advocate with them, somebody that, so it's not a question, that's something that we're gonna work on. The moms group wants to try to address some of those issues. And then the other thing is, he got out of treatment many times, and then he's got these fines in different counties. He had like 4 different counties that he had fines in, not felony. And then he ends up out and he gets a job, is doing well, and they not caught up with payments, they come and they arrest him, he loses his job, it's a vicious cycle. So I didn't even know where to begin with working with the different counties that he had fines in. Now, you've got all this hanging over the head of a person that's in recovery, and it just puts him into a deeper depression. So those are just other areas, not questions really, but other areas that I think, really need to address.
I can answer a little bit of that too, is, so one of the things that we have at Sober Living, and our Sober Living is full-time case management, because a lot of times Sober Living is like, it can be it's very difficult. Like when you first get sober, there's so many overwhelming issues, right, that you have, whether it's in the court system or family members or kids or bills or credit, like all of these different things make it overwhelmingly difficult to just get on a place where life is not difficult before you can even address sobriety, right? Or the internal conditions that are causing you to use. And one of the trends right now is, recovery coaching, like I said, the case management or sober living house. For us, that's impactful. They're taking, we had this guy come through the sober living house and he had to have a driver's license in 3.5 years, right? He didn't have a driver's license in 3.5 years. All he had to do was pull a driving abstract from the DMV and pay $60, right, to get his driver's license back. But his life was just so unmanageable. And there were so many different things going on in his life that he didn't know and didn't just have the ability to have somebody help him through that and get to that place. And now he's got a full-time job. He's got his driver's license back. He's got a car and all of these things. He just needed not only help getting to a place where he was living in long-term recovery, he also just needed help, right, getting to a place where life was manageable.
My name's Misty, I'm a volunteer with Kenneally. I actually have two questions. The first question is, if I have a child that does have some traumatic experience happen for them, where would they go to get that help for their child?
Is that a substance abuse issue or like?
The initial trauma? Yeah, just the initial trauma, because I have dealt with it. I mean, I found out myself, it was actually very difficult. So, I've had people come up and ask me that question, like, where do I want to get my kid help? Even if it's
Psychologist, a child psychiatrist, adolescent psychiatrist.
And I'm going to refer to
three really strong options in McHenry County. You have the McHenry County Crisis Line, which I encourage everybody to have in their phone because it's a misnomer. You don't have to be in crisis. You can just be looking for help and guidance. And they are probably the most accurate current resource in McHenry County because they're making phone calls on a regular basis. And unfortunately, with the funding being what it is, 1 week you're open and 1 week you're not. So they have that. 211 is another resource, very simple, keep it in your phone. McHelp is another, that's a texting app that you can get for Android or for iPhones. And that's simply you text in a message to them and say, this is what I'm dealing with, how can you help me? And the people who answer Crisis Line and the people who answer McHelp are master's level or higher with years of experience in the system, and you can talk to them at any time. And so I give that as just the general community component. If you know what the trauma is, then they can help you narrow it into, do you need domestic violence? Do you need substance abuse? Are you looking at a parent who's been incarcerated and that trauma and what that happens? We have all of those, but to provide it to everybody on each level would be hard. Those three resources, hands down in McHenry County, the best option.
But I do want to comment on that. I'll go back to Gabor Monte. What do you call him?
Said it the same way you did.
No, you got an accent. When Gabor Monte was speaking in Chicago to these 300 clinicians, 300 clinicians in our state of Illinois, he asked them, how many of you are trauma certified? 20 of them put their hands up. He said, you're all doing a disservice to your clients, every one of you. You have no business working with them if you're not trauma certified, because you can deal with the substance abuse, but how the hell you deal with the underlying issues? You need to seek out trauma specialists, whether it's been molestation, it's been abuse, whatever, and they're out there. And I know a bunch, but you got to do your research. And unfortunately, though, then we run into another variable because a lot of the families in McHenry County don't have good insurance. That's just a fact. And you're not going to get one of them. And that's an issue in our county.
I was asking because I found the help I needed through actually Rosecrance, but I mean, when people ask me, what is kind of the general way for them, somewhere for them to start?
Because most are cash-pay situations, though.
I would have gone to my pediatrician.
Right. I'll explain this further.
Okay.
And then the second one is, if I'm somebody in the community and I want to help out, where do I go?
Oh, Chris Reed.
He doesn't answer.
Same problem too. I'm fixing 6 months to buy you back. Everyone's got that problem, Chris. You need a second
system.
Answer my call.
Yeah.
You know,
I would suggest the Substance Abuse Coalition. Honestly, it's a place for anybody to start finding a path. And we have so many partners at the table that if you don't match what we're doing specifically, I think that you can find those avenues to help. Chris came to the table and now he's got people going to him and helping. And so I think that's how we're gonna grow our community. And so I have professionals, we just got a group of doctors that might be adding a physician's workgroup to that. So every level, every component has its place to fit at this table. And you determine for yourself what that piece is. So it might be you meet Laura, who's going to be joining us more regularly from Live for Lolly, and go, you know what, I really want to do the Narcan training. We can put you there and help connect you. You don't have to stay part of the coalition. You don't even have to become an active member of the coalition. You can come and get a feel and see what's going on and hear what's happening and then find a path. Because where you find your passion and your strength is where you will benefit this process the most. And it's, like you said, everybody has their skills and their sets.
absolutely. And then people need to find out what they're good at and what they want to do.
Right.
And do it for the right reasons. And man, I'm telling you,
There's lots of
everybody needs
places to
help.
help.
Everybody needs help. I need a lot of help out here.
How do you get Narcan?
How do we get Narcan?
Yeah.
So currently, you can work with, again, through the coalition or Live for Lolly. Most of ours comes via Live for Lolly. So that's an option for training. Walgreens and several of the other pharmacies, you can get it, but it's much more expensive. It's about $150 for 2 doses of Narcan at a Walgreens. That's standard pricing for Narcan. They're not upping that, they're not making any money on it, I can tell you that. And then we're also working not just with police departments, but primary agencies who have high-risk clients. So as Live for Lolly comes in, one of the things we've been talking about is how do we expand, not just on the street, but family and friends. So see us unveiling that as we move through in the next, starting in December, but kicking it off sometime probably in January.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Jason, and my question is, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you guys for everything that you've done, because I'm a participant in the McHenry County Drug Court. It's pretty much saved my life. And the Narcan that you guys, distribute saved my life. So I'd like to thank you guys for that. But my question is, how close are we, or is it even a talk yet, on having a rehab or a detox in this facility, or in the county?
You want me to do that one? I'll take it. So we started this conversation with a group who really started a way out. We had kind of a core group who monitored that program and realized that our biggest gap is getting people not as much detox, but the residential or peer support, longer-term care. So what do we do once they're out? And so I would say that there's discussions going on in hospital systems right now that could lead to detox within our county, but honestly, I'll kind of pass it back, but Chris Reed is now looking at a peer support, longer-term care model as well. And so how soon will it be? As soon as we can find funding, as you said. Funding is a critical piece of that, but also just making sure that when we have it set up, it's something that can sustain itself, because some of these places open and close so quickly that they don't really serve their community. So as much as I don't want to see one more person die, I want to make sure that when we're up and running, we really are consistent in who we're saving and how well we're handling it. So I think that's kind of the statement of our group.
Yep.
You talked about prescription drug wise, like turning, what do you do with the actual needles that you find when the addict is in your home or leaves your home?
Some pharmacies will take the needles back.
It's one area that we're trying to find the best solution for.
I want to throw them in the garbage and I feel like if I get caught with them, I'm going to get in trouble.
Well, I was told by waste management to put them in a Gatorade bottle or in a harder plastic bottle and throw them out with regular garbage.
Yeah, not recycling.
Okay, and just a quick note, I work for a pediatrician. When you say call your pediatrician for mental health, let me tell you the phone calls that I get. Our mental health avenue is very limited. We tell them that to go through the ER, through the 911, because when we call for mental health, the waiting list is ridiculous. where they say your insurance, I can't help you. So I think we need to find a better avenue than, I mean, I get it, like, we deal with it all the time, but to call your pediatrician, we don't really all have the answers either. You want to say call 911, go to ER.
Well, if it's emergency, you should go, you know, if it's that emergent, you should go to the emergency room. The problem is like many medical specialists or specialties, psychiatry is a very, underserved, specialty. Child psychiatry, very, very underserved. Adolescent psychiatry, very underserved.
And McHenry County is very limited.
Exactly. So, and people who specialize in any certain age group, not out here. You'd be looking for Chicago and then to get that referral. So I think.
And I think the mental health board is beginning to really look at that differently and supporting things like teletherapy. It isn't the optimum, but they're really seeing some pretty strong results in what they're being able to do. And that will probably be I think, unfortunately, because it's not face-to-face, but I think it's going to be the answer to some of the problems, especially when it comes to funding, because they're willing to pay for that in what we're still considered a rural kind of community, so we have benefit of that. Because child psychiatry in general, I mean, if you want to get your kid to have a guaranteed job, tell them to go be a child psychiatrist, because they will get hired anywhere and make a lot of money, because nobody, and if they're doing language on top of it, they're heaven sent. We can't find the people we need to serve our community because we have two high demands, high mental health and a language barrier that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. The 20 to 40-year-old age group that we're finding increasingly involved, that leaves a lot of grandparents raising their grandchildren. And it's something that's not really talked about a lot. Are there any support groups out there for those grandparents that are taking over, you know, their grandchildren, basically adopting them? Because they're
I mean, I would say groups that specialize for that, probably not. But you know, there's Families Anonymous, Nar-Anon, Al-Anon, Live for Lolly runs support groups. We have a family support group at the other side. I run them in Naperville. I mean, are they specific for that? No, but I mean, there's so many things you can get involved with.
If anybody wants to start a group like that, I'll give you space.
Yeah, well, I just think it's something that is often, you know, hidden as well, because.
Senior Services does offer support for parents, grandparents who are raising their children under any circumstances. So we don't necessarily have a support group, but there is an avenue to get support, get guidance, and get the things that you might need, and that's through Senior Services.
Thank you.
You hardly know it all.
Now you're really getting your card.
What does it cost for 1 kid of naloxone, and what is its shelf life?
Well, what its shelf life is?
Yeah.
And how much does it cost?
Yeah.
Typically, I do not actually deal with prices.
I do.
Um,
The ones that are being sold in Walgreens now, the nasal, are about between $100 to $150. They are covered by all insurance and Medicaid.
Oh, good.
So whatever your copay is, but if you did have to purchase it for cash, about $100 to $150. The auto injectors that we give out are $4,000 a kit.
But how do I go to detox or rehab if I don't have any insurance? You touched on it there, but I think that makes
Call Tim.
Call me, I'll get your ass.
What's the shelf life on that, on those narcotics?
Oh, yeah.
Shelf life, Kaleo, the company that makes the auto injectors, has said 10 years. What I learned from Kaleo is that expiration dates are set by the FDA, not the manufacturer. So there is, if anybody who got the auto injectors, they have a safety built in. The medication goes bad when the window gets cloudy. The nasal does not last as long because it's in a preloaded little thing. So it's generally about 18 months.
This is for anybody. Is there any magic thing to say or way to get the addict to ask for help? Okay? That was easy. What can I do as a parent to help my son who doesn't want to stop?
Call Tim.
Love him and have no option.
All right, at this point, I think we all are tired and I think everyone on this panel is willing to give you their phone number for any additional questions. Is that true? Everyone here is willing to answer questions, whether by email or kind of any other means. So I just want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank the panelists most of all. Thank you, Dave Chapman. Thank you, Chick-fil-A, Crystal Lake, and Tina Russell. Thank you, Liv for Raleigh. Thank you.
You can see this program, on the Algonquin Township website. So you can share this, and you can see it. So this was gonna be out there for them. Tomorrow.
All right.
You're not here yet.